Chapter 672. We're finally back. In a high valley where snow was falling, two silhouettes stood on top of the mountain. It was a man and a woman. The man was thin and weak, while the woman was tall and strong. Yes, we're finally back. The one who spoke was a heavily armored Death Knight. She was Shea. She was quietly looking at the beautiful scenery of the mountains and rivers of the Noah continent. It felt as if a lifetime had passed. Needless to say, the one standing beside her was Ron. He was still wearing a simple black robe, but his eyes had a deep feeling. They were like the starry sky and the unfathomable sea. Compared to when they left the Noah continent, he had changed a lot. Returning to their hometown, the Noah continent, both of them felt relieved. "Where are we going now?" After a while, Shea asked. They had just returned from the Shu'alan continent and did not know about the war between the Scourge Church and the Holy See. "Where are we going?" Ron pondered for a while and nodded. "We'll go back to the Undercity first before we make any plans." "Okay." Shea had no objections. At this time, she could not help but turn to look at Ron. Her heart was slightly moved. After half a year in the Shu'alan continent, Ron had changed a lot. At this moment, his strength was not something Shea could guess. The current Ron was something that Shea could only look up to. "Let's go." Ron was expressionless. He did not move much, but he waved his hand slightly. Pring! In an instant the sky changed color. A powerful death aura stirred the clouds. An unparalleled aura descended from the sky and filled the entire space. Countless snowflakes were swept into the air. For a moment, the entire world was as cold as ice. The powerful aura filled the sky like a ferocious ancient beast, full of cold and murderous aura. At this time, the entire ground began to shake. Rumble, countless boulders fell. The ice that had not melted for tens of thousands of years fell on the hillside, causing countless accumulated snow to turn into a huge ball and roll down. Avalanche. For a mountain that had been covered in snow for 10,000 years, an avalanche was a huge disaster. Not only the mountain peak, but even the entire earth was trembling under this terrifying aura. Boom, boom, boom! The peak of the mountain suddenly exploded, as if something had broken out of its shell. A huge head suddenly drilled out of the ground, bringing with it an intense cold aura. It was the head of a supergiant beast. The size of the supergiant beast was far beyond anyone's imagination. Just its eyes alone were bigger than an adult. Roar! The super behemoth roared. Soon after, its head and body slowly drilled out of the mountain peak, as if it had been born in the mountain to begin with. Following its movements, countless boulders rolled down with a thud. The might of a supergiant beast shook the heavens and earth. Swish! A sound was heard. The supergiant beast spread open a pair of huge wings. It was a pair of decaying bone wings, but this pair of bone wings didn't reduce its prestige at all. Instead, it made it famous. It was unknown how many experts had trembled in fear before this pair of bone wings. This was a frost dragon, an unimaginably powerful frost dragon. Its appearance was accompanied by coldness and slaughter. Its appearance brought death and fear to those who saw it. The frost dragon stood on the high mountain peak like a king looking down on the world. Compared to its huge body, the mountain peak under its feet was like a small throne. Roar! The frost dragon stood on the tall mountain peak and let out a long roar. The air within a radius of 10 miles around it instantly froze into ice, and the temperature dropped by more than 10 degrees, turning into a world of ice and snow that lived up to its name. It spread its wings and fanned a gale. The gale was mixed with ice and snow, constantly sweeping through the valley. Looking at the back of the frost dragon, Ron's eyes revealed a thoughtful expression. "Let's go," Ron said. His body floated up like smoke. In a flash, he landed firmly on the frost dragon's head. Shea's body also flew up, and without any hesitation, he followed. Roddiwald's face was a little pale. He did not expect the Scourge Church's Godrealm powerhouse to suddenly appear. This caught him a little off guard. In the face of Homelin's frightening power, Rodewald did not dare to think that he was a match for him. Although he was at the peak of the sacred domain and was only half a step away from entering the God realm, he understood that this half a step was the gap between them. The other angels were also motionless. They were also an intelligent race and knew that the other party's strength was not something they could contend against. Rodewald composed himself. He understood that in front of dozens of angels and tens of thousands of Holy See soldiers, it was impossible for him to retreat. Once he did, his face and prestige would be gone. He was not the only angel in the sacred domain who was at the peak of the sacred angel guard. Rodewald cleared his throat, looked at Homelin and said, "Your Excellency is the Scourge Church's Godrealm powerhouse? Great Elder Homelin?" He had learned from Pope that the only Godrealm powerhouse in the Scourge Church was the Great Elder Homelin. Homelin did not answer his question. He stared coldly at Rodewald like an eagle, staring at him until he felt goosebumps. After a long time, he slowly said, "You are the Legion of Holy Angels from the mortal plane?" Homelin did not know the relationship between the Legion of Holy Angels and the Sacred Angel Guard. He guessed that the Legion of Holy Angels in front of him was the one that destroyed the Scourge Church 100,000 years ago. These things happened long after his death. Rodewald thought that if the Legion of Holy Angels really came, how could he still be alive? Although there were not many God-realm powerhouses, there were at least 100 of them. Thinking of this, Rodewald smiled slightly. "That's right, we are the Legion of Holy Angels from the mortal plane. Your Excellency Homelin, if you know what's good for you, you should quickly give up resisting, disband the Scourge Church, and kill yourself. You might even leave your corpse intact." Rodewald deliberately omitted the Sacred Angel Guard. This army was only Andrew's personal guard, and was far too inferior to the real Legion of Holy Angels. Homelin did not comment on Rodewald's answer, and his face was expressionless. Rodewald took a step forward and proudly said, "Your Excellency Homelin, this time, we came from the mortal plane to the Noah continent because of God's will. He sent his own son, His Highness Andrew, to solve the problem of the Scourge Church. Let me tell you, His Highness Andrew's strength is extraordinary, and your resistance is futile. If you know what to do, quickly." Before Rodewald could finish his words, Homelin suddenly attacked without warning. The soul energy in his body suddenly erupted, and when he attacked, it was to kill. Death's hand. A powerful aura of death descended in an instant, enveloping the entire space. Within the black fog, a huge shadow of a hand that could destroy heaven and earth was formed, and it suddenly grabbed at Rodewald. Rodewald jumped in fright. Not good, quickly form the angel battle formation. With a whoosh, dozens of angels reacted in an instant and powerful holy flames erupted from their bodies. The holy flames formed a powerful defensive technique, and like a curtain of light, it enveloped everyone. Boom! The Death's hand descended and grabbed the small curtain of light, suppressing it. Even the holy light became dim. Boom! Finally, the curtain of light could not hold on any longer, and it suddenly exploded. The defensive formation formed by dozens of angels collapsed at once. Boom! 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 Dozens of angels fell like meteors, and they fell to the ground one after another, creating a large hole in the hard ground. White feathers scattered everywhere, and traces of blood floated in the air. Rodewald finally could not hold on any longer, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The other angels were also dispirited. They, who had been insufferably arrogant in front of the powerhouses of the sacred domain of the Scourge Church, finally tasted the bitter fruit. Homelin was able to injure dozens of angels with a single attack. Such strength would have been enviable in any main plane. So strong. Vivian was completely stunned. She did not think that the strength of a divine Magus necromancer would be so strong. She thought that even if the Grand Elder rushed over, it would take some effort to deal with these angels. She did not think that the Grand Elder would be able to do it in such a short time. Lord Grand Elder! With regards to Homelin's strength, even a high-level magical beast like Kay could only look up to him. His eyes revealed an excited expression. Divine Necromancer! Rodewald's face was ashen. Knowing that the other party was a divine necromancer from the sacred domain, he had already dispelled any thoughts of counterattacking. According to legends, after a necromancer became a divine necromancer, their strength would take a qualitative leap, far surpassing other professions. Not to mention an angel battle saint like him, even 100 angel battle saints added together would not be able to compare to a single finger of the other party. A divine necromancer was not afraid of being besieged. Facing such a powerhouse, Rodewald admitted that he was not a match for him. At this moment, he only wanted to escape. But just as he raised his head, his expression suddenly changed. Homelin moved again. He did not have the habit of holding back. Once he attacked, he would kill them all. Rather than injuring all 10 fingers, it was better to break one. Homelin did not know how many angels had descended from the mortal plane this time. At the very least, there would be one less if he killed one. Death withering. Homelin's eyes shone brightly as he activated his death energy once again. This time, his target was the heavily injured angels on the ground. At this moment, Rodewald was so regretful that his intestines turned green. All the sacred domain angels of the Sacred Angel Guard were here. He was afraid that they would all be wiped out in one fell swoop. If that was the case, even if he managed to escape, it would be difficult to explain to His Highness Andrew. At this moment, a ray of light suddenly appeared in the sky, streaking across the horizon like a meteor. The target of this ray of light was none other than Grand Elder Homelin, who was in the middle of casting a spell. Boom! The ray of light hit Homelin squarely. Homelin groaned and fell to the ground. Grand Elder Homelin! Vivian was greatly alarmed and could not help but shout. Chapter 673. At this moment, Rodewald's eyes lit up. This is... His Highness Andrew. In the depths of the sky, a burly figure slowly appeared. It was a tall man with perfectly proportioned muscles and an extremely handsome face. Andrew's face was expressionless. He flapped his giant wings and stepped on the void as he slowly approached. Following him were several powerhouses of the sacred domain from the Holy See. Heron, Ivan, God Eli, and even the Pope came in person. As soon as the Son of God Andrew appeared, he was like an incomparably bright sun, causing all the experts present to dim in comparison. Andrew's figure slowly descended and landed on the ground. His expression was indifferent, and his whole body carried a terrifying might that suppressed everyone to the point that they could not raise their heads. His Highness Andrew. Rodewald ignored his injuries and quickly went up to greet him. At this moment, he looked like a rooster that had lost its feathers. He looked rather miserable. Yes. Andrew did not even look at him. With a wave of his hand, a white light spread out and suddenly exploded in the air, then turned into countless light spots and scattered. In an instant, everyone in the area covered by the light spots was healed. In addition to the dozens of sacred domain angels who were injured by Homelin, there was also the Divine Angel Guard Legion that had been fighting before. Thank you, His Highness Andrew. Thank you, His Highness Andrew. The Saint Angels all stood up and thanked Andrew. In just an instant, Andrew had healed their injuries, and even their strength had been restored. Divine healing. This was the most powerful healing technique. Not only did it heal the injuries of the injured, but it also recovered their strength and even adjusted their bodies to their best state. At this moment, the angels were all in high spirits as if they had been reborn from the fire. They stared at the sacred domain powerhouses of the Scourge Church, wishing that they could fight again. Pung! A cloud of black fog suddenly appeared. It was Homelin, who had been sent flying by Andrew's punch. Great Elder Homelin had returned. At this moment, his expression was gloomy, and blood was seeping out of the corner of his mouth. It seemed that he was injured. Hamelin did not look too good. He had learned from the soldiers that the legion of holy angels from the main plane had descended on the small Noah continent. However, he did not know that there were powerful beings from the sacred domain among the people who had descended on the Noah continent. First Elder, Vivian and the others immediately went up to him. She was about to say something when Hamelin waved his hand and stopped her. All of you, take your troops and retreat. Don't come over without my orders. Yes. Vivian knew what the First Elder was going to do. She was worried, but she also knew that there was no use for them to stay. As for the troops, they were even more useless. The Scourge Church's troops retreated in an orderly manner under Vivian's orders. There were many wounded among them, but unlike the Holy See, they did not have Andrew's divine healing to heal them. They could only return to drink health potions. Fortunately, the Scourge Church had produced a lot of health potions over the past few years. It was enough to support a large-scale battle. Andrew coldly watched the Scourge Church's troops retreat, but he did not give the order to pursue. His eyes were firmly fixed on Hamelin. This was the key figure of the Scourge Church. As long as this person died, the Scourge Church would fall apart again and disappear into the river of history, just like 100,000 years ago. Andrew already knew from Pope that this person in front of him was the key figure to the revival of the Scourge Church. Of course, he would not let him go. All of you back off. Andrew's eyes were brimming with confidence as he faced the powerful divine necromancer in front of him. They were both powerhouses of the divine realm, but he was confident that he would win. Pope's gaze was evasive. He stared fixedly at Hamelin, as if he wanted to swallow him whole. He gritted his teeth. Your Highness Andrew, this is the Scourge Church's divine necromancer Hamelin. He is not easy to deal with. I suggest that Pope did not continue, but his meaning was clear. There was no need to reason with the Scourge Church. Andrew's eyebrows were deeply furrowed, and a strong displeasure flashed across his face. Back off. It was not Andrew. Rodewald had already spoken. He knew Andrew's temper. Once he had decided on something, he would not change his mind. As the Son of God, Andrew had his own unique pride. This pride did not come from the special privileges he enjoyed because he was the Son of God. On the contrary, as the Son of God, Andrew put in more effort than others in his cultivation. This meant that his life was destined to be extraordinary. A genius was not scary. What was scary was a hard-working genius. It might only take a short time to go from being an apprentice to the sacred domain. Some geniuses might even take 20 or 30 years to reach the sacred domain, a height that others would never be able to reach in their lifetime. However, the sacred domain was only a starting point. Starting from the sacred domain, every step forward was incomparably difficult. It might take a few decades to go from the beginner level of the sacred domain to the intermediate level of the sacred domain. From the intermediate level of the sacred domain to the advanced level of the sacred domain, it might take 3 or 4 times longer. From the advanced level of the sacred domain to the peak level of the sacred domain, it might take thousands of years, or even a lifetime. Of course, this was only for ordinary people. For a very small number of geniuses, this theory could not be applied to them. Andrew was such a person. He had only used a few hundred years to walk a journey that others could not walk in their lifetime. He had reached the height of a powerhouse in the sacred domain. However, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens above the sacred domain. It had been more than 100,000 years, and he had found it difficult to take a single step forward. Even so, he was still an out-and-out genius in the eyes of outsiders, a powerful son of God. Great Elder Hamelin. Andrew smiled. Let me introduce myself. I'm from the Legion of Holy Angels of the Order Plane. I'm also the person in charge of this operation in the Noah continent. I've been assigned by my father to handle this matter." At this point, Andrew paused for a moment. "My father's name is Michael." After Andrew said this name, he quietly watched the other party's reaction. Unfortunately, he was soon disappointed. Hamelin did not say anything. How could a small place like the Noah continent know my father's name? Andrew laughed self-deprecatingly, secretly laughing at his own stupidity. The name Michael was not well known in the Noah continent, but in the sacred domain, it was a resounding existence, causing the entire sacred domain to tremble. Michael had countless titles, but there was only one that truly caused people to revere him, and that was the commander of the Legion of Holy Angels. The Legion of Holy Angels' fame in the sacred domain was second only to the Scourge at its peak. Andrew was his son, and that was enough. Hamelin's injuries had gradually recovered. He had been ambushed by Andrew, but his injuries were not serious. For a powerhouse in the sacred domain, a small injury was not too complicated. Of course, Andrew had not deliberately ambushed him. He had only wanted to stop Hamelin from killing his own people. With his conceited character, he would definitely not do something like ambushing. Under Andrew's orders, the holy angels began to withdraw. Only Andrew and Hamelin were left on the huge battlefield. "What do you want?" Hamelin asked in a low voice after the holy angels and the church's army had withdrawn. "What do I want?" Andrew smiled slightly and said sternly, "I want to give you a chance. A fair chance." A low voice sounded in Hamelin's ears. He was stunned, as if he could not believe his ears. In terms of overall strength, the Scourge Church was no match for the Holy Angels. In terms of individual strength, Hamelin did not have the confidence to defeat this young man in front of him. Hamelin had already planned for the worst. He did not think that things had developed to this point, and that there would be a miracle. In the face of absolute strength, all struggles were futile. But now, this young man was saying that he would give him a fair chance. What did this mean? As if seeing the shock on Hamelin's face, Andrew smiled slightly, and his voice was so calm that there was not the slightest ripple. "Yes, you did not hear wrong. I am willing to give you a fair chance. Now that both sides have withdrawn their forces, then. As long as you defeat me, the Noah continent will be yours." Andrew looked meaningfully at Hamelin. "The Noah continent will be yours." This simple sentence was like a sudden clap of thunder, exploding in Hamelin's mind. In an instant, he understood the other party's meaning. This was a gamble. The wager was the Noah continent, and the wager was the two of them. If Hamelin was defeated, then there was no doubt that the Scourge Church's influence in the Noah continent would be completely wiped out. But as long as he defeated Andrew, the Legion of Holy Angels would completely withdraw from the Noah continent. Hamelin did not expect that the other party would propose such a gamble in a situation where he had the absolute advantage. This was simply a good thing that fell from the sky. Hamelin did not know what the other party was planning. According to his guesses, either this young man was too conceited, or he was scheming, but it seemed that the former was more likely. "I did not expect this guy to be so conceited." Hamelin's eyes were fixed on God's Son. Is this because he has absolute confidence in his own strength? Or is he too arrogant? Hamelin did not understand, but a good thing that fell from the sky could not be ignored. If he did not take it, then he would be a fool. "This proposal is very good, I completely agree," Hamelin said with a slight nod, his eagle-like gaze fixed on Andrew. "Then let us fight, to decide the ownership of the Noah continent." The conceit of God's Son had completely enraged him. "Let us fight to decide the ownership of the Noah continent." Andrew's gaze became fiery. He did not know how long it had been since he had this feeling of blood boiling. At this moment, his body was also burning with a raging battle intent. Hamelin's eyes flashed with a trace of astonishment, but then it became gloomy again. Although he had a great advantage in this gamble, when it came to a real fight, it might not be easy. On a small slope, The undead army of the Scourge Church had retreated and were resting. What's going on? The army of the Holy See has also retreated? Vivian used the undead magic ghost to observe the distance quietly. The surprise on her face could not be concealed. Are the two of them going to duel? When Kay heard this, she became excited. To her, a one-on-one battle was more interesting. It was obvious that if it was a one-on-one battle, the situation was in their favor. So, we have a chance? Aurora's face flashed with a trace of surprise. Not necessarily. As soon as Aurora's voice fell, Lynn's cold voice was heard. It was like a basin of cold water, extinguishing the flames in everyone's hearts. Chapter 674. Homelin wasn't going to back down in a one-on-one duel to determine the ownership of the Noah continent. In fact, he had no way to back down. Come! Homelin took a step forward, and his soul force silently spread out. Unknowingly, it filled the entire space. The ground under his feet turned greenish-black and quickly hardened. Homelin held a long staff in his hand. At the top of the staff was a sinister snake head. Its entire body was emitting a demonic luster. It was a saint artifact, the nether snake staff. Andrew smiled faintly and took a step forward. His body emitted a trace of light, and his transparent wings spread out with a swish. At the same time, his body slowly floated up. Sacred, dignified, and enormous Guangming's energy filled the entire battlefield. When Guangming's energy and Homelin's soul force came into contact, it was as though two enemies had met. Their eyes were exceptionally red. The two of them hadn't even started fighting, but the two of them were already clashing with one another. Andrew pulled out a one-handed sword that emitted a white light from nowhere. He smiled and said, "Come, Pung." Homelin made his move. A black fog suddenly blasted towards Andrew. The black fog rotated intensely and arrived in front of Andrew in the blink of an eye. "Ah!" Andrew shouted, and the sword in his hand emitted a stream of light, cutting Homelin's black fog into two. Andrew raised his head slightly, and in the next moment, he was clearly stunned. In front of him, countless undead had already been summoned. They were densely packed like an army. At a glance, there were probably more than 100,000 undead. Countless undead howled and charged towards Andrew. Interesting. Andrew wasn't alarmed. Instead, he was delighted. He smiled faintly, and a trace of excitement flashed in his eyes. The curtains of a war between divine realms had been raised. Boom, boom, boom. Every time Guangming's energy and soul force clashed, it would cause a huge commotion between heaven and earth. Countless lights and shadows spread out and shot towards the sky like pillars of light. Countless souls were constantly circling in the air, letting out mournful cries. Andrew held the holy sword in his hand and wantonly killed like a tiger in a flock of sheep. All the undead were not his opponent. The skeleton warrior had fallen, the skeleton magician had fallen, the terror knight had fallen, the ghouls had fallen. As Andrew swung his sword, those skeletons melted like snow, emitting wisps of green smoke. They screamed miserably as they turned into puffs of green smoke and disappeared. Roar! A loud roar came from the sky. It was more than a dozen abyssal bone dragons flying over. They opened their mouths and spat out a black flame dragon breath. The dragon breath was extremely corrosive. Before it even arrived, Andrew could already smell a strong stench that made him extremely uncomfortable. Holy spirits of the 9 heavens, heed the ancient covenant and come to the other side of time. Spirits of the 4 directions, heed my plea. Andrew chanted quietly, his face full of solemnity and holiness, making people not dare to look up at him. God's guard, Andrew spat out the last syllable of the incantation. In an instant, a dazzling light burst out from his body. Andrew's wings spread out, making him look like a god of war in the sky. Boom! Dozens of black flames sputtered on Andrew's body, but they were blocked by an invisible light screen. The powerful black flame dragon breath actually couldn't harm him in the slightest. Hamelin also didn't stay idle. He hid among the skeletons, constantly changing his figure, and bombarding Andrew with all kinds of necromancy magic. But at this moment, Andrew only shone for a moment before he was drowned by countless skeletons. In the distance, both sides were already dumbstruck. They were all shocked by the strength of a god's domain powerhouse that surpassed everything in this world. Strong. Really too strong. Vivian had long been shocked to the extreme. When necromancy magic was cultivated to the god's domain, it was actually this powerful. At this moment, she deeply felt her own insignificance. Strength. I want even stronger strength. Vivian's eyes reddened. She clenched her fists and secretly swore in her heart. The hearts of the Scourge Church's people were heavy, as if a heavy stone was pressing down on them. This battle concerned their life and death, but they couldn't do anything. Powerhouses of the sacred domain were high and mighty existences in the eyes of the world, but a battle between God's domains wasn't something they could participate in with their meager strength. Sigh, Lin sighed softly. If only Ron was here. No one said anything. They thought that even if Ron was here, with his strength, he also wouldn't be able to do anything. All hope was entrusted to Hamelin. If the Great Elder wins, then it's fine, but if he loses... Vivian thought of this and couldn't help but shiver in her heart. A trace of fear appeared on her face. Fortunately, Hamelin didn't disappoint. From the beginning to the end, he always had the upper hand. The boundless sea of skeletons, coupled with the powerful abyss skeletal dragon, pressured Andrew to the point that he couldn't breathe. On another hillside, Rodewald and the rest of the Angel Guard Legion and the Holy See were also nervously watching. The Pope's snow-white beard danced in the wind. Do we need to help? Ernst swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He felt that the current situation wasn't optimistic. No need. The Angel Guard Captain Rodewald smiled and waved his hand. His Highness Andrew hasn't shown his true strength yet. The other angels only stood coldly. They didn't even look at the powerhouses of the sacred domain of the Holy See. Even the eyes of the Pope, who had a high status, were full of arrogance. At this moment, Andrew's situation had taken a turn for the worse. He was surrounded by countless undead creatures. In the sky, dozens of abyss skeletal dragons constantly roared and surrounded him. There were also bat-like gargoyles that densely filled the sky. On the ground, there was an army of skeletons that were as dense as ants. Countless skeletal archmages raised the bone staffs in their hands. The tip of the bone staffs constantly flashed, waiting for Hamelin's order to attack like a storm. Hamelin had already completed his encirclement of Andrew. In the dark aura of the undead that was like a canopy, the power of Guangming on Andrew's body became increasingly dim. His body was faintly shrouded in black fog, sealing off part of his power. Faced with the heavy encirclement of the undead army of tens of thousands, it wasn't that Andrew hadn't thought of breaking out. Unfortunately, he failed every time because there were simply too many undead creatures. Good! The Great Elder is indeed powerful. I'm afraid that angel is in trouble. Seeing that the Great Elder Hamelin had gained the upper hand, the people of the Scourge Church who were watching the battle from afar cheered one after another. Their faces were brimming with excitement. Even Vivian, whose expression had always been tense, revealed a smile. In the distance, two figures quietly watched the battle in the sky, their brows tightly knitted. How terrifying! Frigga said in astonishment. Is this the power of a divine magus necromancer? It's indeed powerful, she then sighed. Even if I were to go against him, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to gain any advantage. There are too many undead creatures. That Godrealm powerhouse from the main plane is probably going to lose. Not necessarily, Firth said coldly. I've come into contact with Godrealm powerhouses from the main plane before. None of them are simple. I believe that he must have an incredible trump card. His Highness Andrew. A trace of panic flashed across Pope Ernst's face. He turned to look at Rodewald, "Sir Rodewald, is this still all right?" If not for Rodewald's presence, he would have led the army of the church and charged over. He knew that if Andrew were to lose, the Holy See would definitely suffer. This, faced with such a predicament, Rodewald was also somewhat worried. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell at a glance that the great elder Homelin of the Scourge Church had gained the upper hand, and had beaten His Highness Andrew to the point of being unable to breathe. Rodewald gritted his teeth. "Let's wait a little longer. I don't think that His Highness Andrew will admit defeat so quickly." Andrew was heavily surrounded by the undead army. He held the holy sword in his hand and gently flapped his pure and holy wings. There was no expression on his face. "Pretending to be calm, huh?" Homelin laughed coldly. He had been summoning undead creatures all this time just for this opportunity. "What a pity. No matter whether you are the Son of God or not, you will definitely die today. Even God won't be able to save you." Homelin's eyes shone brightly. He waved his hand, and the nether snake staff emitted a demonic green light. The ferocious snake head seemed to come alive, its long tongue flicking continuously. Roar! Dozens of abyssal skeletal dragons let out a roar that shook the heavens and the earth. They simultaneously breathed out a breath of death dragon breath at Andrew. Dozens of black flames swept towards Andrew. The high temperature seemed to scorch the air. On the ground, countless skeletal archmage trainers also moved. Countless blazing fireballs, ice blades, tornadoes, and other high-level spells were ferociously blasted towards Andrew in the sky. In an instant, tens of thousands of undead creatures launched their attacks towards Andrew. Their momentum shook the heavens and the earth. Faced with the attacks of tens of thousands of undead creatures, Andrew had no way of dodging at all. Homelin had even calculated every single blind spot. Chapter 675. Andrew was still unmoved by the powerful attack that was like a mountain pressing down on him. He sneered softly. "Not bad, you really have some tricks up your sleeve." Andrew stared intently at Merlin, the corners of his mouth curling up slightly. "This guy is much stronger than many of the powerhouses of the divine domain on the mortal plane. However, this kind of strength is far from enough to kill me." Andrew mumbled. Andrew murmured. He stretched out his hand, and an exquisite ancient book appeared in his palm. The Book of Divine Prophecy. At this moment, the Book of Divine Prophecy in the hands of Pope Ernst appeared in Andrew's hands. The Book of Divine Prophecy was a gift bestowed by the head of the Legion of Holy Angels, Michael, to the first Pope of the Holy See, Antonio. Like the Calamity Divine Scepter, it was a symbol of the supreme authority of every pope. However, very few people knew that the Book of Divine Prophecy in the hands of the Pope was not a book, but a divine weapon. A genuine divine artifact. Facing Homelin's earth-shattering attacks, Andrew finally used this divine weapon. The golden pages of the book were suddenly opened, and a faint golden light burst forth. At this moment, Andrew's eyes turned faint golden, and his entire body was filled with a sacred and solemn aura. God said, "Let there be light." God saw that light was good, and separated light and darkness. Light represents fairness and justice, while darkness represents filth and evil. Where the sun shines, darkness has nowhere to hide. In the air, Andrew ignored the attacks of tens of thousands of undead, and softly chanted. His voice grew louder and louder, and at this moment, his eyes shone brightly. He spread his wings, and light shot out in all directions. Boom! The entire sky seemed to be on fire, and the light of the Book of Divine Prophecy enveloped the entire space. In an instant, everyone seemed to have been blinded, unable to open their eyes. This light, quick! Quick, close your eyes or you'll go blind. The onlookers were all shocked by this light, and they all closed their eyes. The powerful force caused the entire world to tremble. Divine weapon, this was the power of a divine weapon. It was as dazzling as the sun. Boom! The radiance on Andrew's body rose to its peak and then disappeared with a swoosh. Everything returned to its original state. Everyone was stunned. They looked at everything in front of them as if they couldn't believe their eyes. Disappeared. All the undead creatures besieging Andrew disappeared under the illumination of the holy light, as if they had never appeared. The abyssal bone dragons, terror knights, gargoyles, skeleton archmage, and the tens of thousands of undead creatures that had surrounded Andrew were all annihilated. Without exception, they turned into a cloud of green smoke and disappeared into the air. The entire world became empty. Andrew held the sacred sword in one hand and the prophecy book in the other. His expression was still indifferent, as if he had done something insignificant. At this moment, a smile appeared on his face. The situation had taken a sudden turn for the worse. With the appearance of the Book of Divine Prophecy, the tables had turned. No one in the Scourge Church dared to accept this reality. Homelin was defeated. He had been utterly defeated. The countless undead creatures that he had summoned were nothing more than a joke in front of the powerful divine artifact. Vivian trembled all over. She truly felt the fear of death. No. Impossible. It's not like this. Vivian's heart was bleeding. She had realized what failure meant. Failure meant that no one could stop the Holy See. Under the leadership of the Son of God in front of her, the Scourge Church would be destroyed once again. Since the Scourge Church had developed until now, countless believers had put in a lot of effort. Now their actions would become evidence of supporting heresy, and they would pay the price with their lives. Not a single one of them could escape. We're finished. Di Lin closed her eyes in sorrow. On the other side, the people of the Holy See heaved a huge sigh of relief. Smiles appeared on their faces. I've lost. Homelin's face was ashen. At this moment, he seemed to have aged a few decades in an instant. His whole body became hunched, and the calm and composed demeanor from before had long disappeared. He now looked like an ordinary old man. Silence. Silence. The entire battlefield fell silent. It was as if a needle had fallen to the ground. Although they already knew the result of the battle, they were still stunned when they heard Homelin say those words himself. Great Elder Homelin of the Scourge Church actually admitted defeat. Frigga murmured. Everything in front of her seemed to have overturned her understanding. In her opinion, Homelin's strength was already at the peak of its peak. Even she would not dare to say that she could win easily. However, in front of that angel, he was defeated in just a moment. It was a crushing defeat. Even his struggle seemed so powerless. Firth Rand did not speak. He did not feel any joy in his heart. On the contrary, he was aware of a deep crisis. He could not help but ask himself a question. Even Homelin was defeated by an angel from the domain of the gods from the main plane. Then, in the council, who could stop this killing god? In the end, perhaps the entire Noah continent would become the world of the Holy See. This was not something they wanted to see. Thinking of the legend of the Scourge Church from 100,000 years ago, Firth Rand's expression turned ugly. Very good. Andrew smiled and said, You are the most powerful necromancer I have ever seen. If I did not have the Book of Divine Prophecy, it would have been very difficult to defeat you. As he spoke, he slowly raised the holy sword in his hand, his azure eyes firmly locked onto the black-robed Homelin. I like straightforward people. As a reward, I can leave your corpse intact. Speak, great elder of the Scourge Church, do you have any last words? Homelin's body trembled violently. He stared fixedly at Andrew, his body slowly descending. He was very unwilling, but he had no choice but to accept the reality in front of him. In the face of powerful strength, all struggles were futile. Even if he fought with Andrew again, the result would be the same. Homelin took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Then, he heard a clang sound as the nether snake staff in his hand was thrown to the ground, making a crisp sound. Homelin sighed and shook his head. He glanced at Andrew and hesitated for a moment. "Your Highness Andrew, I have lost. If you want my life, you can take it. But before I die, I hope that the noble Your Highness Andrew can fulfill a request of this sinner." Hamelin tried to be as humble as possible. He knew that the fate of himself and the Scourge Church was in the hands of this young man from the main plain. "Sure, as long as your request is not unreasonable." Andrew's expression was very calm, but the holy sword in his hand was still pointed at Hamelin, not relaxing for a moment. "Yes, Your Highness Andrew, I only have one request." Hearing this, a trace of hope appeared in Hamelin's eyes, and he slightly straightened his back. "Your Highness Andrew, I hope, after you kill me, you can let go of the Scourge Church." "What?" Chapter 676. No. Andrew rejected Hamelin's words without hesitation. He had come to the Noah continent to destroy the Scourge Church. What would happen if he killed Hamelin and left the Scourge Church behind? If he could not complete the mission, he would only be condemned by his father when he returned to the main plane. Andrew was not that stupid. Hamelin's mouth twitched a few times, and his face revealed an extremely unwilling expression. He knew that this was an extremely naive request, and that the other party would never agree to it. However, he had no other choice but to say it. Despair hung over the heads of the Scourge Church like a cloud. They knew that they could escape for a while, but not forever. The Scourge Church's defeat was a foregone conclusion, and it was not something that could be salvaged by human strength. At this moment, Hamelin's heart was filled with regret. If he had known this would happen, he would have learned the skill, summon Frost Wyrm. However, he had been too impatient. He had just been promoted to the Divine Realm, and had not even stabilized his strength before impatiently starting a war called Revenge. If he had summoned the most powerful undead creature, the Frost Wyrm, he might have had a chance of survival in the battle with Andrew. Hamelin's eyes stared fixedly at Andrew. "If I could summon a Frost Wyrm, the one who would die today would definitely be you. Are these your last words?" "Very good, I heard you." Andrew laughed loudly, but then he stopped laughing and said calmly, "Unfortunately, you won't have the chance." Andrew smiled. "Even if you really did summon a Frost Wyrm, you won't be a match for me." After saying this, he opened his eyes, and his eyes shone brightly. Die. The holy sword emitted a dazzling white light, turning into countless ribbons that rolled down on Hamelin with a terrifying momentum. Hamelin sighed slightly and closed his eyes to await his death. "Great Elder!" The eyes of the Scourge Church members cracked open. They could only watch helplessly as the long sword in Andrew's hand slashed down, but there was nothing they could do. The difference in strength between them and Andrew was too great. Pope and Ernst finally smiled victoriously. However, the next moment, his smile froze on his face. In the sky not far away, a huge figure suddenly appeared, accompanied by a heart-trembling roar, pouncing over. "What's that?" Ernst only managed to say a few words before he was completely stunned. This was because he saw that his own hand, that pale and weak hand, had at some point in time, a layer of frost had condensed on it. It was like a mirror reflecting a white light. The cold wind was bone-chilling. Ernst's body trembled involuntarily. Roar. The thunderous roar almost shattered everyone's eardrums, as if they were being stared at by an ancient ferocious beast. Everyone shuddered in unison. The most terrifying thing was that a bone-chilling cold air suddenly spread out along with the roar, causing the temperature of the entire battlefield to drop by a few dozen degrees. The vast land almost turned into a vast world of ice and snow. "What?" Andrew frowned. He was flying in the air, constantly flapping his wings. His gaze focused, revealing a trace of astonishment. "What is that?" Hamelin also opened his eyes wide, looking into the distance. His expression was both surprised and happy. What's coming?" Vivian was so cold that her teeth were chattering. Her eyes could not help but reveal a trace of excitement. This aura is so familiar. Although Vivian did not know what was going on, the aura that came from afar revealed a sense of familiarity. That's Ron. Aurora had already felt it. If that terrifying aura was not Ron, who else could it be? It can't be? Ron, how is that possible? Lin could not help but be moved. His aura, how can it be so powerful? Pring pring pring, the powerful aura from afar floated over. When it appeared in the sky above the battlefield, everyone was stunned. That was a super-huge creature that looked like a dragon. It had several pairs of horns, huge wings spread out, covering half the sky. Its entire body was emitting a bone-chilling aura. Although it looked extremely huge and clumsy, its speed was not at all fearsome. Heavens, what kind of creature is that? It's too terrifying. Does the Noah continent have such a terrifying creature? Cold, it's so cold. The appearance of the giant beast caused everyone on the battlefield to panic. The super-huge and terrifying figure coupled with the extremely cold aura pressed down on everyone's hearts, making it difficult for them to breathe. At this moment, the temperature on the battlefield had already dropped to the freezing point. The air that was exhaled instantly froze into ice shards. Dragon! That guy is a dragon, right? The dragons have finally made their move? Kay looked at the super-huge beast in the sky, a trace of excitement in her eyes. No, that's not right. It's not a dragon, it's... Vivian's entire body was trembling. She was so overwhelmed with joy that no one heard what she said next. Firth and Frigga in the sky were extremely shocked. They knew in their hearts that the terrifying creature in front of them was definitely not a dragon. Even if it was, it had nothing to do with them dragons. However, when Frigga's gaze locked onto the thin black-robed figure standing on the frost dragon's back, it was as if she had been struck by lightning. She was stunned on the spot. Andrew stared at the huge creature in front of him. The shock in his heart could not be any greater. What a terrifying cold aura! It even has a trace of an ancient vicious beast's aura. Could this be? Could it be? Homelin heaved a sigh of relief as the corner of his mouth rose. It was obvious that he already knew what had come. It was a frost dragon, the strongest creature that the necromancer could summon. It had a cold and murderous aura. According to legends, the frost dragon was the mount of the death god. Its appearance represented the descent of the death god. Homelin recognized this terrifying frost dragon, but he was more interested in the identity of the person who had come. To be able to summon a frost dragon, it had to be someone from the undead lineage. Is it a powerhouse from the divine realm from the main plane of the undead? Or... Homelin thought to himself. The sudden appearance of the frost dragon and the identity of the person who had summoned it caused everyone to speculate. When Homelin's gaze fell on the small figure on the frost dragon's back, he was stunned. Ron. The one who had summoned the frost dragon was none other than the young master of the Scourge Church, Ron, who had been on a mission in another plane. At this moment, he was a genuine powerhouse from the divine realm. Being able to summon a frost dragon was a sign that he had advanced to the divine realm. Ron coldly stared below. He did not expect that so many things would happen after he had left the Noah continent. If he had come a little later, he might not have been able to see Grandpa Homelin. Ron. Ernst did not expect that it would be Ron who had suddenly returned. Moreover, he had brought a frost dragon with him. Many people in the Holy See knew Ron. His arrival caused everyone to panic. What did you say? He's Ron? The young master of the Scourge Church, Ron? Rodewald, the commander of the Holy Angel Legion, was stunned. How is that possible? Didn't you say that he was a powerhouse from the sacred domain? What's the matter with this frost dragon? Rodewald was so angry that he roared at Ernst. As far as I know, that Ron, he is indeed a powerhouse from the divine realm. Ernst stammered. I heard that he went on a mission in another plane, but I don't know how he became a powerhouse from the divine realm. Needless to say, Ron must have had a special encounter there. It was just that Ernst could not say it out loud. Moreover, it would be strange if it was so easy to become a powerhouse from the divine realm. Thinking of this, Ernst's heart suddenly sank. That Ron seemed to be only 22 years old this year. Damn it! There's an error in the information. This time, we're in big trouble. Rodewald's back was drenched in cold sweat. He knew very well that the other party's strength was far beyond his imagination. He was even stronger than the great elder called Hamelin. Sir Rodewald, what do we do now? Ernst was already scared out of his wits. The terrifying aura of the frost dragon made him tremble as he asked. We can only place our hopes on Sir Andrew. Rodewald had already calmed down, and his face was as calm as water as he spoke. Who are you? After the initial shock, Andrew had also calmed down. He sized up Ron and said indifferently, Are you an angel? Ron also noticed this human-like fellow in front of him. He had once traveled in the snow-orchid continent, so he naturally did not believe in the legends of gods. Ron knew in his heart that this fellow who looked like an angel in the Holy Sea's Holy Bible was from a higher race from the main plane. Boom! Andrew and Ron's eyes met, and an intense collision occurred. It was as if sparks were flying in the air. Chapter 677. You're Ron. Andrew finally knew who this person was. He had heard about him from Pope and Ernst. Looking at Ron, his eyes flashed with passion as he smiled. Very good, this is interesting. He stared at the frost dragon under Ron's feet. This is the strongest undead creature, the frost dragon? I'd like to see how powerful it is. Ron rushed to the battlefield and swept the surroundings with his spiritual sense. Everything was clear to him. You're very conceited. Ron smiled. The corners of his mouth curled up as he said indifferently, but I can tell you that conceited people will die very quickly. You're courting death. Andrew was finally enraged. With a bang, his body disappeared and turned into a stream of light, fiercely attacking Ron. Clang! At this time, a woman wearing heavy armor and fluttering white hair suddenly flashed in front of Ron. She blocked Andrew's attack with her long sword. Guangming's power and soul power collided, creating a loud sound. This woman was undoubtedly Shea. At this moment, she only felt a huge force surging towards her. She groaned and retreated a few steps, frowning. It was obvious that she had suffered a small loss in the conflict just now. Ron obviously saw this and immediately said, Shea, you go down first. Leave this person to me. With that, Ron waved the dragon-bone staff in his hand. A large amount of black fog surged out from his body. At this moment, his eyes turned green. Death coil! Ron shouted, and a green aura suddenly rushed out, pouncing towards Andrew like a tiger released from its cage. With Ron's current strength in the divine realm, the death coil he released was much more powerful than when he was in the sacred domain. The green aura faintly revealed a sinister skull. Andrew originally used his long sword to block, but after blocking, he felt that something was wrong and was shocked. Not good, this is a soul attack. Disperse. Andrew's figure rapidly retreated. He had rich battle experience and reacted in an instant. He held his long sword horizontally, and the white light on his body suddenly skyrocketed. Like the dawn in the darkness, it dispelled the surrounding darkness, and all the negative statuses on his body disappeared. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, the two of them exchanged several moves. The danger involved was unimaginable. Roar! At this time, the frost dragon summoned by Ron finally showed its might. Its huge wings that covered the sky suddenly flapped, and it opened its bloody mouth and spat out an extremely cold dragon breath at the rapidly retreating Andrew. World of ice and snow. Boom! The powerful ice dragon breath descended from the sky. It was as if the water in the air had turned into ice. The temperature suddenly dropped by several tens of degrees. Everyone within a 10-mile radius felt as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. In the blink of an eye, the lush land was covered in silver. It was a world of ice and snow. The power of the frost WRM's ice element was actually so terrifying. Thump, thump, whether it was the members of the Calamity City or the Holy See, they all shivered. The extreme cold that hit them in the face was too much for them to bear. Of course, the powerhouses of the sacred domain were excluded, but they did not feel good either. Quick! Everyone, retreat further! At this time, Shea had already flown down and said hurriedly. Although they were standing far away, in Shea's eyes, they were still too close. If they were not careful, they would be affected. Shea had been with Ron all this time. She had watched Ron ascend to the God Realm, so she had a deep understanding of the terror of the Frost Dragon. Vivian had just lifted her leg when she felt a slight stagnation. Her expression changed slightly, and she immediately shouted, "Yes. Pass down my order, retreat another 10 miles. The Scourge Church was very fast. After receiving Vivian's order, they immediately retreated. However, the order was issued a little late, and many people were frozen stiff. "Grandpa Homelin, are you all right?" Shea asked with concern as she supported Homelin. Homelin carefully stared at Shea for a while, then looked at Ron, who was crazily fighting with Andrew in the sky. He nodded excitedly. "Good. Very good. I didn't expect Ron to ascend to the God Realm. Now there's hope for the revival of the Scourge Church." Ron's ascension to the God Realm was a very obvious sign. Homelin understood what a God Realm powerhouse meant to the Scourge Church. The two God Realm powerhouses of the Scourge Church made the other members of the Council pale in comparison. After all, the strongest dragons in the Council only had two God Realm powerhouses. Even Shea had stepped into the peak of the sacred domain. How could Homelin not be excited? "Sister Shea." At this time, Aurora called out. She blushed and lowered her head. "Aurora!" Hearing this voice, Shea was slightly stunned at first. Her expression then became surprised and happy. She quickly rushed up and grabbed Aurora's hand. "Aurora, when did you get here?" "I just ascended to the sacred domain. I'm here to help Ron," Aurora said softly. She looked at Shea with a complicated expression. She was only a beginner in the sacred domain, but Shea was already a peak powerhouse in the sacred domain. However, this wasn't what surprised her the most. What surprised her the most was Ron. She didn't expect that when they met again, Ron would already be a God Realm powerhouse. Back then, this necromancer, who was even weaker than her, had become a Sanctuary Realm powerhouse in just a few years. On the other hand, she, who was hailed as a genius by Undine, was only a Sanctuary Realm powerhouse. This made Aurora, a proud elf, feel somewhat disappointed. "I really don't know how this guy cultivates," Aurora looked at the sky and thought fiercely. If Ron was standing in front of her, Aurora couldn't wait to bite him. "It's good that you're here. It's good that you're here." Shea didn't know about Aurora's unwillingness to admit defeat and said with a smile. The Holy See also began to retreat. They were also afraid that with their low strength, they would be involved. Boom, 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 black fog and light intertwined. Souls and longswords collided, creating a series of sparks. Those who hadn't fought the Frost WYRM personally wouldn't be able to understand the horror of the Frost WYRM. That extremely cold aura, not to mention getting close, even touching it would turn it into ice. In front of the Frost WYRM, any city's defense was so fragile. The extremely cold dragon breath was enough to freeze all the defenses of a city. Even someone as strong as Andrew, the Son of God, was forced into an extremely difficult situation by the Frost WYRM. Due to the bone-chilling cold, the speed that he was most proud of was greatly reduced. In the distant sky, R.A. Firth and Frigga had been paying attention to the battle between the Scourge Church and the Holy See. It could be said that the battle between the two had gone far beyond the control of the Council. For the first time, They felt that the powerful council was so powerless. The frost worm that Ron summoned is very strong. R.A. Firth took a deep breath, deep fear flashing in his eyes. Even if he faced the current Ron, he might not have a good chance of winning. R.A. Firth then sighed slightly, his face full of disappointment. Is this really Besley's son? He has actually become a Godrealm master? Moody was a taboo name among the dragons for a long time. Although he had changed his name to Ron, none of the dragons dared to touch this reverse scale of R.A. Firth. There was once a dragon who mentioned Ron's name in a quarrel and was locked up by the furious R.A. Firth. If Aunt Besley saw this, she would be very happy. Frigga murmured, her expression very complicated. She knew that the young man in his early 20s in front of her was her fiancé. That day, she took the initiative to propose marriage in front of Aunt Besley in order to find the best excuse to reject the marriage proposals of the other dragons. In fact, in Frigga's heart, she also looked down on a human with ordinary talent. According to her estimation, no matter how hard a human worked, their strength would reach the sacred domain at most. Moreover, there were very few opportunities to reach the sacred domain. Talent and hard work were indispensable, but now that she thought about it, she might have been wrong. R.A. Firth also regretted it. At this moment, the stubborn young man who wanted to take away Besley in front of him appeared in R.A. Firth's mind. Speaking of which, this young man was also his grandson, but how did he treat him? His precious daughter married a human and gave birth to a human child, but he did everything possible to kill this child. Every time R.A. Firth looked at Besley's eyes, he could see a kind of hatred in her eyes. This hatred was directed at his unreasonable father. At this moment, R.A. Firth finally understood that whether it was a human or a magical beast, this Ron was still Besley's child. Black fog filled the air, sword chi crisscrossed, and countless lightnings streaked across the void. The earth trembled and the sky collapsed. The battle between the powerhouses of the sacred domain caused the world to change. Not to mention the earth, the sky, and even the surrounding space were torn apart. At this moment, the battle between the two had reached its climax. The space where the two of them fought had become the death god's forbidden zone. Swoosh! Andrew's perfect figure flashed out in the air. At the same time, on the other side of the sky, a cloud of black fog appeared out of thin air and gradually turned into Ron's figure. This guy is so strong. After a short exchange of blows, Ron already understood Andrew's strength. His fighting style was broad and unrestrained. His attacks might not be fatal, but they were flawless. Ron knew that an opponent with such a firm mind and valiant strength was the most difficult to deal with. This angel's strength was even stronger than that demon he had met on the Shuelon continent. Ron and Andrew coldly looked at each other. Although they had temporarily stopped fighting, it did not mean that they had stopped fighting. The momentum and killing intent in their hearts did not decrease at all. "You are very strong." At this time, Andrew slowly opened his mouth. "To be honest, before I came here, I never thought that the Scourge Church would have such a person. What surprised me even more is that you are still so young." As he spoke, Andrew's eyes revealed an intense killing intent. With his eyesight, he could naturally see Ron's true age. He was only 20 years old. To him, he was just a child. He was already a Godrealm powerhouse in his 20s. Such talent, even in the main plane, would make him a genius that was hard to come by in 100,000 years. It was no wonder that Andrew's face revealed killing intent. The undead branch of the Scourge Church had such a talent, so he had to kill him. What was even more foolish was that these old fellows of the Holy See had allowed him to grow to such a level. Ron didn't say anything. He slowly calmed down the rapid aura in his heart and quietly waited for the next wave of storms to descend. However, Andrew smiled slightly. Suddenly, his eyes flashed and his killing intent surged. "No matter how much of a genius you are, you will fall at my hands. Because I am the noblest angel, the most powerful child of God, "Wake up, young man!" Andrew shouted and raised his longsword high. A pair of beautiful white wings spread out on his back, emitting a dazzling light. A Sanskrit sound appeared like the sound of nature, filling Andrew with a holy and Guangming aura. Guangming's sword. Andrew shouted, and the long sword in his hand slashed down fiercely. In an instant, space stilled. Even the trembling earth stopped shaking. In the void, a huge longsword suddenly fell from the sky, aimed at Ron's frost dragon. Chapter 678. Boom! The powerful sword energy burst out in a stream of light, spreading to the surroundings at an extremely fast speed. Roar! The frost dragon was in pain and suddenly let out a loud roar. Powerful frost energy spread out in all directions, bouncing Andrew far away. How can this be? At this moment, Ron's heart trembled, because he saw a large opening from the shoulder to the abdomen of the frost dragon. Thick black fog was frantically seeping out from within, and the remnant power of Guangming was greatly reducing the black fog. In just one move, the frost dragon had been heavily injured. What a tyrannical sword! Ron couldn't help but be shocked. He was well aware of the frost dragon's powerful defense, and the opponent's sword had actually heavily injured the frost dragon. It could be seen that the power of the sword was extremely strong. If another sword attack came, his frost dragon would probably be destroyed. Summoning another one would consume a large amount of soul energy, and even a divine realm expert like Ron would not be able to bear it. However, the frost dragon was indeed the strongest undead creature. In just a short while, it had sealed its wound with ice, and then it recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. Andrew was similarly shocked. He had used almost 80% of his strength in that sword attack, but he had only been able to heavily injure the frost dragon, and had not been able to destroy it. Legend had it that necromancers were extremely difficult to deal with, and divine necromancers who had reached the divine realm were even more difficult to deal with. In the wars of the main plains, a powerful divine necromancer could usually resist several divine realm experts. It seemed that the legends were not false. Looks like they're evenly matched. In the distant sky, Frigga and Firth Frigga were quietly floating. A gentle breeze blew past Frigga's pretty face, and her long hair fluttered in the wind. I wonder who will win in the end? In her heart, Frigga still hoped that Ron would win. Although her feelings towards this fiancé that she had only met a few times were a little complicated, no matter what, he was still a member of the dragons. Firth Durian's face darkened as he sighed. No matter who wins, it won't be a good thing for us dragons. The reason the dragons were able to occupy the pinnacle of the Noah continent was because the dragons had produced him and Frigga, two divine domain experts. However, now that the Scourge Church had also produced two divine domain experts, this was enough to change the power structure of the Noah continent. Perhaps the situation where the dragons ruled the entire continent would soon be broken. R.A. Firth understood that although Ron could be considered half a dragon, in his heart, he was more inclined towards humans. Andrew stood quietly in the void, his azure eyes quietly looking down at Ron, the expression on his face changing constantly. It seems like it's time for me to use my trump card. This Ron has brought me too many surprises. Andrew's eyes widened, revealing a trace of ruthlessness. I can't let him continue to grow. With a crash, the book of divine prophecy magically appeared in Andrew's hands. A strange luster appeared on his body, as if countless shields were surrounding him, giving off an awe-inspiring and inviolable aura. As he spoke, Andrew began to chant in a low voice. His power turned into specks of light that continuously condensed on his body. Evil, inferior, lowly creatures in front of God, your actions are laughable. I sense an evil power in your body, it is filled with brutality and slaughter. As Andrew continued to chant, a huge phantom suddenly appeared behind him. That huge phantom seemed to break through the heavens and earth, standing proudly in the void. The huge phantom in the sky had a face that resembled Andrew's, and it was coldly staring at the weak creatures below. This is, at this moment, Ron's eyes suddenly opened wide. He had already realized what the other party was about to do. That familiar energy fluctuation, as well as that terrifying and loathsome divine power of Guangming, all of this reminded him of the terror of the past. Divine judgment. That's right, that was the divine judgment. Ron had once seen the Pope use that move, but the divine judgment released by Andrew now was much more powerful than the Pope's and Ernst's. At this moment, Andrew seemed to have transformed into a god, and Ron seemed so insignificant in front of him. The powerful divine power of Guangming broke through the void, and even the air began to burn. Andrew's body was already covered in an inextinguishable sacred flame, like the radiance of the sun, guiding all living things. Countless boulders were swept into the air, and the powerful pillar of light that appeared in the air burned all the grass and trees in the surroundings. The earth, which had been calm for a long time, finally began to tremble again, as if a god was about to descend. Boom! 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 The ground was shaking, and everyone on the ground was thrown off balance. The saint-level combatants were still fine, as they were able to fly off the ground, but those below the saint level were in trouble. They couldn't even stand properly. The appearance of the god caused many believers of the Holy See to kneel down and pray in a low voice. Divine judgment. This is the divine judgment. Ernst's eyes were full of excitement. I didn't expect the power of the divine judgment to be so terrifying. Ron, you damned heretic, I want to see you turn into ashes under the divine judgment. Ernst stared at Ron in the sky, his eyes full of hatred. A trace of the terror of death struck Ron's heart. At this moment, Ron felt that death was so close to him. Even if he became a god, he might not be able to shake the world with the divine judgment. Under the divine judgment, all evil, heretics, blasphemers would be turned into ashes. And Diqian spread his wings to the fullest. At this moment, his light illuminated the entire sky, and even the sun in the sky was overshadowed. The book of divine prophecy in his hand flipped rapidly, desperately urging Guangming's divine power. Ron, you must defeat him. Shaya stretched out his hand to support the heavily injured great elder Huameilin, who was tottering on the ground. A trace of worry flashed in his eyes. Even someone as strong as Huameilin couldn't help but worry about Ron. He was accumulating power, and soon he would launch a thunderous attack on Ron. The space around Ron had been completely sealed by Guangming's divine power. In other words, Ron had nowhere to run. Frost Dragon, go! Ron gritted his teeth and growled. He was not willing to sit and wait for death. He waved the bone staff in his hand, and the Frost Dragon roared and pounced. Roar! The Frost Dragon twisted its huge body and flapped its wings, bringing with it a strong gust of wind. It roared and pounced towards Andrew. It opened its mouth and spat out a powerful ice flame dragon breath. The ice flame dragon breath was like a ball of blue flames. What was different from flames was that it did not have the extreme temperature to burn everything, but it had the extreme cold to freeze everything. The ice flame dragon breath swept towards Andrew, and the extreme cold energy even froze the space. A very powerful dragon breath. Andrew smiled, his face was filled with arrogance. But Ron, I regret to tell you that in front of a true god, all struggles are futile. You will find that death is your best choice. After saying that, he raised the sword in his hand and shouted, Ron, in the name of the gods, I pronounce you guilty. Divine judgment. As soon as Andrew finished speaking, the sword in his hand fell. In an instant, the vast and powerful divine power of Guangming came crashing down like Mount Tai. Boom! Time seemed to stop, and even the space was shattered by this powerful force, revealing black wounds in the void. Those were countless spatial cracks. Not to mention the ice flame dragon breath. Even the powerful frost dragon was turned into ashes in an instant under this powerful divine judgment. What? Ron's eyes widened in shock. The power of God's judgment was far beyond his imagination. It was different from Ernst's divine judgment. Andrew's divine judgment truly possessed the will of a god. It was as if the holy angel Michael had personally come to the Noah continent. Under the power of this god's will, all resistance, all defense, all power seemed so laughable. The will of a god could not be defied. Ron, Shea, Vivian, and Aurora shouted in despair. They looked on helplessly as the power of divine judgment destroyed the frost dragon and bombarded the defenseless Ron. Ron, you were a very powerful opponent. Given time, you might have had a chance to grow. But unfortunately, you will fall today, and the one who will kill you is me, Andrew Stuart Farrant, the great Son of God. Your life will become my undefeatable glory. Your head will become my spoils of victory. I'll return to the main plane of order with pride and receive my Father's reward. Lowly human, you should feel honored to become my stepping stone. Finally, the powerful divine power of Guangming engulfed Ron in an instant cloak. At the last moment of life and death, a black book appeared above Ron's head at some unknown time. It kept spinning above his head, emitting a strange power. This is the Book of Death. Ron's spiritual sense swept over that familiar cover. There was no mistake, that was indeed the Book of Death. Ron didn't even know when it had appeared. Whoosh! The Book of Death seemed to have sensed danger, and its thick pages automatically flipped open. Ron's eyes suddenly opened wide as he saw a few familiar words in his spiritual sense. Book of Death, Chapter 5, Death Vortex. Chapter 679. Boom! Just as Ron was about to be engulfed by God's judgment, Ron finally activated the Book of Death. Formidable death divine power burst out and formed a huge vortex of death that kept revolving. Unconsciously, the vortex grew bigger and bigger. What? No one was more shocked than Andrew. Just as he thought that victory was in his grasp, an unexpected turn of events suddenly occurred. Only he knew how terrifying the power contained in that constantly revolving death vortex was. Ron couldn't help but let out a loud roar. His arms kept waving, and the dragon-bone staff in his hand turned into a phantom. He was in a crazy state, and his soul force was like a flood that was uncontrollably pouring out. His eyes had already turned green, and the faint green color looked very frightening. Rumble, 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 rumbling like muffled thunder, the death vortex kept growing bigger and bigger, and soon turned into a super vortex with a diameter of over 10 kilometers. It frantically rotated, desperately absorbing Guangming's boundless divine power. Under its devouring, Andrew's Guangming's divine power gradually showed signs of instability. Good luck, even Homelin couldn't help cheering for Ron. His beard trembled, and his face was full of excitement. The Scourge Church's group, who had just sighed in relief, had hopeful expressions in their eyes. On the other side, the people of the Holy See were getting more and more nervous. Damn it! Andrew was finally angry. He was the noble Son of God, and in this small secondary plane, he should be the most powerful existence. But ever since he descended to the Noah continent, he had been bullied by the undead time and time again. How could he not be angry? It wasn't just him, even the huge god behind him faintly showed anger, as if it felt that its dignity was being challenged by Andrew. The majesty of the gods cannot be blasphemed, and the will of the gods cannot be defied. Gather the power of the heavens and the earth to exterminate all evil in the world. Sprinkle the earth like light and make the earth fertile. Andrew loudly chanted an incantation. At the same time, he slowly opened his arms. Strangely enough, his originally agitated face slowly became calm and serene. The expression on his face was solemn and pious. However, on the contrary, the aura on his body became increasingly fierce. At this moment, Andrew's pair of pure white wings turned completely golden. He said in a deep voice, "Ron, you and your undead magic shouldn't exist in this world in the first place. Disappear. Take your filthy soul and all your crimes with you and disappear from this world together. In your dreams." Ron took a deep breath and clenched his fists angrily. "Not to be outdone," he retorted. "You shameless gods wear false masks and pretend to be dignified and noble, but in fact you are all thieves and prostitutes. Ron, I swear to use my fallen body to overthrow this hypocritical world that you have created." With that, Ron let out a long howl, and the soul power on his body suddenly erupted. At this moment, he pushed his power to the peak. Traces of blue veins slowly extended on his not-so-handsome face, looking abnormally terrifying. The death vortex that was growing bigger and bigger gradually revealed the ferocious image of the skeleton Grim Reaper, confronting the god behind Andrew. Guangming's divine power and the divine power of death collided with each other. Two balls of light, one black and one white, reflected each other, forming an extremely terrifying scene. The sky was trembling, the earth was cracking, the mountains were flattened, the rivers were evaporated, and countless trees and boulders were swept into the air, spiraling in the air. The vast sky seemed to darken as death shrouded the earth. Boom! Guangming's divine power and the divine power of death collided once again. The momentum was so shocking that even the sky showed a slight pause. Then, countless gusts of wind mixed with rocks and gravel swept toward the surrounding people. Homeland's expression changed slightly. "Oh no, this shock wave is too powerful. We have to dodge it. No. We won't make it in time." Vivian wailed in her heart. Looking at the billowing smoke and dust rolling toward them like a mountain and a sea, and like an indestructible 10-foot-tall wave in the sea, her eyes were full of despair. Boom! The huge shock wave knocked everyone off their feet. Of course, on the other side, the Holy See did not have it easy either. Only R.A. Firth and Frigga, who were in the sky, were better off. Looking at the terrifying destructive power, R.A. Firth and Frigga could not help but be speechless. This is the power of a god? The two looked at each other, their faces full of bitterness. If both Andrew and Ron could really use their divine powers, their strength would far surpass the two of them. Divine powers were bestowed by God. As the son of the holy angel Michael, it was not surprising that Andrew had part of his divine powers. What puzzled R.A. Firth and Frigga was, where did Ron's strength come from? Ron did not know that someone was pondering the source of his divine powers. At this moment, he knew that if he did not fight with all his might, he would probably die here. The two divine powers were pushed to the peak, and in the sky, a white light suddenly erupted. Boom! Finally, the chaotic earth finally calmed down, and the terrifying power in the sky began to gradually dissipate. The earth was a mess, and it was full of the smell of survivors. Crash! The people who were still in shock poked their heads out of the soil and looked at the world with fear in their eyes. Who won? Everyone had a question mark in their hearts, and they all looked for the figure that belonged to them. At this moment, Ernst's eyes focused, and then they became pleasantly surprised. "Your Highness Andrew." As they spoke, Andrew's body, which was taller than a human's, slowly descended from the sky and landed on the ground. He gently folded his wings, and at this moment there was still an indifferent expression on his face, like ice that would not melt for 10,000 years. There were basically no wounds on his body. "Your Highness Andrew, Your Highness Andrew," Rodewald and the people of the Holy See immediately went up to him in surprise. They knew what it meant that Andrew had survived unscathed. It meant that the Holy See had won the final victory, and the Scourge Church, which was once so powerful that it could not be anything and almost forced them to destroy it, was going to be destroyed. Ernst took a heavy step forward and shouted excitedly, "Your Highness Andrew, Please allow the sinner to lead the army of the Holy See to pursue the Scourge Church and completely destroy them. Yes, Your Highness Andrew, please give the order quickly. The holy sword in my hand can no longer endure the thirst. Kill them all. All the people of the Holy See looked at Andrew with blazing eyes, and expressed their opinions one after another. Andrew's expression was still calm, and no joy or anger could be seen. He put his hands behind his back, and his cold gaze swept across the crowd. He said indifferently, "Pass down my order. All troops retreat to Mount Hygel." What? Everyone in the Holy See could not believe their ears. Didn't His Highness Andrew already win a great victory? Shouldn't he be pursuing them now? Why did he give the order to retreat? Not to mention Ernst, even Rodewald could not understand. Wasn't His Highness Andrew's mission in the Noah continent to destroy the Scourge Church? Why did he want to retreat now? Yes, Your Highness Andrew. Although he could not understand, Rodewald did not ask a single question. He faithfully carried out Andrew's order, and slowly retreated with the Holy Angel Guard Legion. Seeing that the most powerful Holy Angel Guard Legion had retreated, the people of the Holy See could not stay any longer, and could only reluctantly retreat. At this moment, a cloud of black smoke appeared out of thin air on a protruding rock, and slowly turned into Ron's appearance. Ron looked at the Holy Angel Guard Legion in the distance, and heaved a sigh of relief. Ron, at this moment, the powerhouses of the Scourge Church had also discovered Ron's traces, and they were pleasantly surprised as well. "Ron, you're not dead?" Di Lin rushed up and grabbed Ron's hands, her eyes filled with tears of excitement. Ron smiled. "I'm fine." As he spoke, Hamelin, Shea, Vivian, Kay, Aurora, Cooper, and the other powerhouses also came up to greet him. Seeing that Ron was fine, they all breathed a sigh of relief. When they saw Andrew walk down as if nothing had happened, they thought that Ron was already dead. "Ron, what do we do now?" Vivian asked. Everyone looked at Ron, and they all regarded Ron as their backbone. Ron smiled and walked past them with his hands behind his back. As he walked, he said, "Let's go. This war is over." The war is over? Before anyone could recover from their shock, Ron had already floated away. In the previous battle, Ron and Andrew were well aware that they had exhausted all their strength. There was no point in continuing the battle. Since that was the case, it was better for them to retreat and recuperate, and find another opportunity to fight next year. Moreover, the two of them had already discovered the danger of someone spying on them from afar. The two people spying on them were not any weaker than them. They're leaving just like that? In the sky, Firth had a trace of disappointment in his eyes. According to his estimation, the two of them should have fought until both sides suffered. "Maybe they found us," Frigga said after thinking for a while. Raffield nodded. "However, I believe that they will not give up just like that. They will definitely continue. It's just a matter of time. Let's go." Frigga sighed. Looking at Ron's back, she felt an inexplicable pain in her heart. Andrew quietly floated in the sky, looking at the back of the Scourge Church's army as they left. Suddenly, a smile appeared on his calm face. "Ron, you're a very good opponent. I believe that I won't be lonely in the days of Noah. Although this war is over, the war between us holy angels and the undead is not over." Andrew's face sank. "On the contrary, this is just the beginning." Chapter 680. The thrilling battle ended in a draw. The Holy See and the Scourge Church both retreated to their respective lines of control and did not cross the line. Even the Abiya Empire took the initiative to spit out the land they had occupied during the war. It seemed that the war had ended just like that. Peace was restored between the two sides. The Holy Roman Empire and the Abiya Empire even sent envoys to each other and improved their relations. 2 years later, Ron married the night elf Aurora and the celestial wolf King Di Lin as his third and fourth wives. The grand wedding banquet was held in the Undercity of the Scourge Church. Unexpectedly, as Ron's old enemy, the Son of God, Andrew, even sent a lot of congratulatory gifts. All of this showed that things were developing in a good direction. There were even voices of reconciliation between the Holy See and the Scourge Church. Both sides even had deeper exchanges. However, anyone with a discerning eye could see that this was just a smokescreen. Behind the strengthened cooperation and harmony, there was a treacherous hidden murderous intent. In the same year, Ron and Basara gave birth to their first child. It was a daughter, and Ron named her Isis. Isis was an ordinary human. She had a pair of big sparkling eyes and looked somewhat similar to Basara. Isis's birth made Ron crazy with joy. He hugged her all day and couldn't stop smiling. Under his instructions, the Undercity held a celebration for 3 days and 3 nights. The other 3 women were also very envious and wished that they could give birth to a child for Ron. Giving birth to a child was not something that could be rushed. Although Ron was also working very hard, the other 3 women's bellies were still not pregnant. However, during this period, something happened by chance. However, the outcome of this matter was far beyond everyone's expectations. The matter was like this. After the Abia Empire and the Holy Roman Empire were open to each other, there were more and more people coming and going. In the border city of the Abia Empire, a few active soldiers went to the Holy Roman Empire's Asinaris to play during their vacation. After getting drunk in a small tavern, they had some conflicts with the city's guards. Then, one of them was killed. The Abia Empire naturally would not let this matter go. After all, the one who died was not an ordinary soldier, but a talented student from the Imperial Academy of Imperial Sciences. He was a mid-level officer in the army and had the strength of a senior professional. The Legion of the Deceased's Legion immediately sent people to negotiate with Asinaris to ask for an apology, compensation, and to hand over the murderer. In the end, they received rough treatment from Asinaris. In the past 2 years, the Holy Roman Empire had been suppressed by the Abia Empire. Under the premise that the Son of God, Andrew, and dozens of angels were guarding Mount Hygel, the Holy Roman Empire's past glory and arrogance were restored. The Holy See now had absolute strength and could even challenge the kingdom of magical beasts. At this moment, their confidence was at its peak. They declared to the outside world that they were a nation blessed by God, and did not care about anyone or any power. When this mentality was placed on the ordinary soldiers of the Holy Roman Empire, or even ordinary people, they naturally became unscrupulous in their actions. The 13th Legion garrisoned in Bila City was naturally infuriated. One had to know that the one who died in Asinaris was his own son. Even though the Abia Empire had promised to further communicate with Holy Empire, this matter had already escalated into a diplomatic incident. However, the 13th Legion garrisoned in Bila City had already lost his patience. Under the premise of not receiving a definite answer, he mobilized all the troops under his command and launched an attack on Asinaris without the authorization of the military. The 13th Legion, which was stationed at the border city, was very powerful. In a situation where the enemy was completely unprepared, it only took them 3 hours to take down Asinaris. The Legion commander caught the murderers of his son, chopped off their heads, and hung them on the city gate of Asinaris. However, the 13th Legion did not occupy the city. Instead, they chose to retreat. This naturally caused a stir among the upper echelons of the two empires. Although the Legion commander took the initiative to go to the military court of the Abia Empire and asked for punishment, he was eventually dismissed from his post. However, to the Holy Empire, this matter was tantamount to a ruthless slap to their noble faces. Regardless of whether it was face or heart, they couldn't hang on to it. Although the Legion commander had been removed from his post, this kind of result naturally wasn't satisfactory to the Holy Church, nor was it able to quell the anger of the Holy Empire. Thus, without any warning, war broke out. This unexpected incident was like a spark that fell on a pile of haystacks. It immediately burned fiercely. The Holy Roman Empire's troops quickly gathered and launched an attack on Pila City. Juliana, who had already predicted this, was naturally not willing to sit still and wait for death. She immediately organized a defense. The war between the two sides broke out between Asinaris and Pila City. Due to the fact that their strengths were similar, they were in a stalemate for a while. Soon, the Holy See was also involved. Under Andrew's instructions, the Angels of the Holy See also joined the war. With the addition of the Angels of the Sacred Domain, the pressure on Pila City's defense suddenly increased. After learning that the Angels of the Holy See had also joined the war, Juliana panicked for a moment. She made a prompt decision and immediately sent people to the Scourge Church to ask for help. 2 days later, Juliana received a handwritten order from the young master of the Scourge Church, Ron. The content of the order was very simple. It was to restore the Legion commander of the 13th Legion to his original position. After seeing this order, Juliana's tensed heart immediately calmed down. She understood Ron's intention and immediately made arrangements to prepare for war with the Holy Roman Empire. Of course, Ron's request had to be complied with. For the Empress of the Abia Empire, Juliana, restoring the Legion commander of the 13th Legion to his original position was a small matter that could not be any smaller. Although the matter of the 13th Legion commander being restored to his position was a small matter, it quickly spread to the ears of the Holy See's higher-ups. It was obvious that this was a provocation from the other side. In a fit of rage, the Holy See immediately ordered an attack. Andrew even sent out more than 10 angels of the sacred domain to join the war. On the other side, the Scourge Church had also mobilized. Countless elite troops gathered at the important border town of Pila City. The sacred necromancer Vivian, the death knight Shea, the golden Beaumont Kay, the violent earth bear Cup, the corpse wizard King Gus, the elf sacred archer Aurora, the heavenly wolf King D. Lin. There was also Cadena, who had already become a water sacred magus. There were also a few powerhouses of the sacred domain who had just joined the Scourge Church. They had also arrived at Pila City. It could be said that other than Ron, Homelin, and Andrew of the Holy See, all the powerhouses of the sacred domain had joined the war. This was an unprecedented war in the sacred domain. The process of the war was so intense that the entire Noah continent was shaken. Similarly, the parliament of the Noah continent that was controlled by the magical beasts was also shaken. They had never imagined that the war between two human countries would involve dozens of powerhouses of the sacred domain. There were still a few powerhouses of the sacred domain who had yet to join the war. This did not include the powerhouses of the Roland Empire from the sacred domain. This was no longer a small matter. If this matter was allowed to continue, it might affect the magical beast empire and even the dragons. Under the strong request of the Speaker Frigga and the Vice Speaker Firth, the Parliament unanimously decided to intervene in this war. Their role was to mediate. The Buzinlada port, where the Parliament was located, welcomed 2 special guests today. In the spacious Parliament Hall, hundreds of powerhouses of the sacred domain were quietly waiting for something. They were all powerful magical beasts, but at this moment they were sitting in their seats in their human forms, waiting for something. On the large round platform in the middle, there were 7 powerhouses of the sacred domain. Among them, the Speaker Frigga was sitting in the main seat, and Firth was sitting in the second seat. The rest were several magical beasts. The beast god of the orcs, Li Jia, and the high priestess of the elves, Undine, had also arrived and were sitting on the large round platform in the middle of the hall. At this moment, the number of senators had increased to 10. They were Andrew of the Holy See, the young master of the Scourge Church, Ron, and the great elder Homelin. Like the dragons, the Scourge Church also occupied 2 seats in the Parliament. This was quite eye-catching. However, these 3 seats were still empty. The 3 of them were the main characters of today's mediation. Senator Ron of the Scourge Church has arrived. Following the high voice of the MC, a figure appeared in the hall. Swish, all eyes in the venue focused on that thin and frail figure. Ron always wore a black robe, but there were two skull-like shoulder plates on his shoulders. He gently took off the hood on his head and slowly walked into the hall under everyone's gaze. This is Senator Ron? It can't be? He's actually so young? He's only about 25 years old. He's already a senator and has the strength of the sacred domain. In addition, he's also the young master of the Scourge Church. The Scourge Church occupied 2 seats in the Parliament's joint meeting. Amazing! The group of magical beasts whispered. Ron's appearance attracted everyone's attention, but no one dared to underestimate his thin body. His strength, his achievements were enough to make all the powerhouses of the sacred domain look up to him. Seeing Ron's appearance, Pertha of the Medusa clan and Na-Pur of the Poison Manticore clan looked at each other, sighed deeply, and lowered their proud heads. The 2 of them were currently sitting in the seats of the powerhouses of the sacred domain. After losing to Ron in the Young Masters tournament, the 2 of them had been holding back their anger. They wanted to defeat Ron and wash away their shame. For this reason, they worked hard to cultivate and finally stepped into the sacred domain. But the moment they saw Ron, they were in complete despair. Ron's strength had left them far behind. Perhaps it would be impossible for them to wash away their shame in this lifetime. Ron walked into the venue, and his pitch-black eyes quietly looked around. Among these people, he saw too many familiar faces. The Dean of the Balrogs Academy was the Fire Law St. Platts, the Dean of the Soaring Dragon Academy was the Golden Dragon Knight Montego, the Dean of the Hanses Academy was the Killer St. Hill, the Beastman clan's Holy Wizard Morin, the Elven clan's former Captain Ian, his big brother Lombard, and among the powerhouses of the Divine Domain, there was Beast God Force, Elven High Priestess Undine, and so on. Every time he saw a familiar face, Ron's heart would feel a trace of excitement. He didn't forget that when he was still weak, these high and mighty powerhouses of the sacred domain and divine domain had helped and protected him without hesitation. Although he still hadn't repaid these favors, he had always remembered them in his heart. When Ron walked in front of Platts, he suddenly stopped. He bent his body and slightly bowed to Platts, Montego, and Hill. Silence. For a moment, the entire venue was silent. No one would have thought that a high and mighty powerhouse of the divine domain would bow to the powerhouses of the sacred domain. Just what was going on? Platts, you old bastard, you King took in a good student. Sigh, why didn't such a student come from our Soaring Dragon Academy? Montego said to Platts with a trace of jealousy as he looked at Ron's departing figure. Seeing his former student, Ron, now a divine domain powerhouse, bow to him, Platts only felt that his face was a lot brighter. Moreover, thanks to Ron, the Balrogs Academy had become the #1 academy in the Roland Empire. Every year, many talents would be sent to the academy. However, the necromancy major had been cancelled because everyone who studied necromancy had gone to the Calamity Academy. Ron isn't just my student, he's also your student. Didn't you see him bow to you just now? Platts chuckled. To be honest, I really didn't think that this kid would grow to such an extent. Hill, the king of assassins, sighed. He had also helped Ron before, and Ron had always remembered that. Ron's gaze swept across the faces of the powerhouses of the sacred domain. Suddenly, he saw a familiar figure. His eyes opened wide, and his gaze was filled with intense joy. That was his mother, Bellis. At this moment, she was sitting in the front row of the sacred domain seat. She was looking at Ron with eyes full of love and gratification. R.A. Firth finally released Mother. Looking at Mother's appearance, she probably went to the Molan Kingdom to see Father. A thought flashed through Ron's mind as he smiled at his mother. Everything depended on strength. Only with great strength could one easily change the outcome of a matter. Ron knew that his mother was released by his grandfather because he was already a powerhouse of the sacred domain. If he was only a powerhouse of the sacred domain, R.A. Firth definitely wouldn't care about him. As for R.A. Firth, Ron didn't have a good impression of him at all. He didn't even want to call him grandfather. This kind of person prioritized strength and maintained familial ties with bloodline. To be honest, he was already extremely tired of him. He didn't even want to say a word to him. Ron came to the large round table, nodded at Li Jiao and Undine, and then pulled out a chair and sat down. Frigga stared at her fiancé in front of her without blinking. She couldn't help but feel a ripple in her heart. However, she immediately suppressed it, and her expression returned to normal. Li Jiao looked at Ron and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He also misjudged. If he knew that Ron could become a powerhouse of the sacred domain today, perhaps he would have been more resolute. The other vice-chairman, Hao Qin, looked at Ron without any feeling. After all, Ron had almost died in his hands. Seeing Ron's gaze filled with intense hostility, Hao Qin only smiled. As the king of the Beaumont clan, Hao Qin wasn't afraid of any challenge. Even if Ron had the strength to kill him, he wouldn't regret what he had done. Of course, Ron wouldn't do anything. After all, he was still Kay's grandfather. Of the 7 senators, in addition to the 5 he had seen before, there were also 2 magical beasts. Ron looked at the 2 gods' domain powerhouses he didn't know and nodded as a greeting. He gently knocked on the table. Great Elder Homelin has something to do at the last minute and won't be coming. His authority will be represented by me. Several people nodded, indicating that they had no objections. They knew that Ron and Homelin were both from the Scourge Church. Why aren't the people of the Holy See here yet? At this time, Firth frowned unhappily. He was the representative of the council to mediate. If one side didn't come, his dignity would also be affected. He turned to a powerhouse of the dragons and said, "Go and tell them when Senator Andrew can come." "Yes, Vice Chairman." The powerhouse of the dragons bowed slightly and said respectfully, "No need to invite me, I'm already here." Bang! The door on the other side of the hall was suddenly pushed open. Andrew walked in with a few angels as if there was no one around. Andrew strode onto the large circular table. However, he did not sit down and instead looked at Ron as he sneered. "Ron, how are you? I didn't come looking for you, but you actually came looking for me. It seems that you didn't take my advice seriously. What gave you the illusion that the Scourge Church is very strong? Aren't you afraid that I'll lead an army of angels to uproot your evil heretical church?" In front of all the powerhouses of the Noah continent, Andrew was aggressive and didn't put anyone in his eyes. He didn't even look at the other powerhouses of the sacred domain. He didn't even greet them. Arrogant. Too arrogant. In the palace of the highest power in the Noah continent, the Son of God, Andrew, showed his arrogance to the fullest. Not only did the powerhouses of the sacred domain change their expressions, but even the representatives of the sacred domain showed anger. In the face of Andrew's arrogance, Ron unexpectedly didn't get angry. It seemed that he was in a good mood after having a daughter these few days. He leaned back and said with a smile, "Your Excellency Andrew, I don't want to criticize you, but I doubt the strength of the Holy See can do this." But I'm very honored that what you said is exactly what I want to do." Ron's face turned cold. "I don't care about the main plane. One day, the Holy See will disappear from the Noah continent." "Ha ha ha ha!" Andrew laughed wildly as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. He stopped laughing. "Ron, if you haven't had enough daydreaming, why don't you daydream a little more? But I have to remind you that it's time to wake up." Ron smiled slightly and didn't reply. Andrew retracted the white wings on his back and took a step forward. He smiled coldly and his eyes were full of provocation. "I won't say any more nonsense. The war between the Holy See and the Scourge Church has officially begun. This time, I won't end the war so hastily like last time. I'll keep fighting until one of us dies." Andrew's words were shocking. In front of all the powerhouses of the Noah continent, he issued a challenge to Ron. "No problem, I'll keep you company until the end," Ron said indifferently. He didn't care about Andrew's threat. Andrew smiled. "Very well, Ron. Wash your neck and wait. I'll bring your head back to the main plane as a souvenir." "Wait!" Andrew was about to leave when he was stopped by Frigga. Andrew looked coldly at Frigga and snorted. "Oh, so it's a fairy dragon. Speak, what do you want?" "I'm busy." Looking at the arrogant Andrew, Frigga took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in her heart. She said indifferently, "Your Excellency Andrew, our council is here to mediate the feud between the Holy See and the Scourge Church. We hope that you can come to a conclusion as soon as possible to resolve the dispute and restore peace. As far as I know, the war this time was caused by a misunderstanding. It doesn't seem to be a very glorious thing to have so many human elites killed or injured because of this misunderstanding. Who do you think you are?" Before Frigga could finish her words, Andrew rolled his eyes and interrupted her. "What? You?" Frigga was stunned by Andrew's words in front of everyone. She trembled in anger. Ever since she became the Speaker of the Council, she had never been humiliated like this. Andrew smiled disapprovingly and said in a low voice, "I, Andrew, never care about anything when I do things. You have no right to order me what to do. As for mediation, that's even more of a joke." The murderous intent on Frigga's face disappeared. If she was not worried about the other party's strength, she would have attacked him now. "Are you not afraid of the other powerhouses from the divine realm?" At this time, a voice suddenly sounded. It was Firth who spoke. He took a sip of tea leisurely and looked at Andrew with a smile. "If you don't accept the mediation, we powerhouses from the divine realm will stand on Ron's side. I believe you will have a headache." Is that so? Do as you wish." Andrew smiled coldly. "To be honest, I have never put you people in my eyes. If you dare to interfere, I don't mind wiping you all out. We angels run rampant in the entire main plane. We don't win by relying on numbers. You'd better remember this." Andrew's eyes looked around. When the powerhouses from the sacred domain met his gaze, they lowered their heads in unison, not daring to look him in the eye. Firth's face sank completely. His eyes flickered, as if he was calculating something. Thinking of the other party's identity as the Son of God, he did not dare to act rashly. The other party did have such qualifications. "Let's go," Andrew sneered. With a flash of his body, he disappeared from the hall as if he had never been there. Everyone was stunned, including the powerhouses from the sacred domain. Everyone had seen the arrogance of the Son of God, but what surprised everyone was that he left unscathed. This was a great blow to the prestige of the council. All the powerhouses from the divine realm had sullen faces. No one spoke, but the anger on their faces could be seen. This Son of God was too arrogant. Only Hao Qin's face remained indifferent, as if he did not take anything to heart. The hall was very quiet, so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. "If that's the case, I'm leaving too." At this time, Ron put down the cup in his hand and stood up. "Ron, you're leaving? Where are you going?" Frigga asked. Her emotions had completely calmed down. She looked at Ron with eyes full of concern. Ron's eyes paused on Frigga for a moment. He smiled and said, "Of course I'm going back to prepare. The war between the Scourge Church and the Holy See. Now is the real beginning." Chapter 681. The sky was red. The earth was red. The entire world was covered in a red luster. This place was dry, dark, and hot. The earth was shrouded in flames. This was hell. Noah described it as the evilest, darkest, and most terrifying place in the continent. Even if all the bad adjectives in the world were used to describe it, it would still be difficult to describe it. However, hell wasn't a barren land. It was vast and had millions of creatures living in it. Of course, these creatures weren't humans. They were extremely strange and evil creatures. There was the three-headed Cerberus, the terrifying six-horned evil spirit, the powerful hellfire, and so on. These creatures, without exception, had a vicious, cruel, bloodthirsty, and aggressive nature. Compared to peace, they preferred destruction and slaughter. Everywhere they went, they would bring destruction to that place. Due to the harsh environment of hell, these powerful creatures of hell constantly launched invasions in order to seize territory and satisfy their lust for slaughter. Their forces spread across all the major planes. Their shadows could be seen in many planar wars. In addition to launching invasions, these violent and aggressive races also fought endlessly. After countless years of killing, the survival of the fittest gave birth to the strongest army. This army was called the Burning Legion. The Burning Legion from Hell. In a dark room, an old man with dark red skin and a horn on his head was standing in front of a magic array with his eyes closed. The magic array was constantly rotating like a lake. It emitted traces of black energy. This black energy wasn't as calm and easy to control as ordinary energy. On the contrary, it was extremely violent and untamed. As its master, the old man with the horn on his head was having a hard time controlling this energy. At this moment, his forehead was covered in sweat. In the black lake, a large head floated in the air. Like the old man, the head's eyes were also closed. At this moment, the eyes of the floating head suddenly blinked. This movement was extremely weak and wouldn't attract anyone's attention. However, the old man noticed it. He was stunned for a moment before suddenly opening his eyes. A hint of joy flashed through his yellow eyes. Found it! Found it! Ha ha! After 100,000 years, I've finally found it! The old man suddenly burst into laughter. Large drops of tears rolled down his cheeks. Those were tears of joy. 100,000 years, it had been 100,000 years. In order to find this beam of light, this horned middle-aged man had been searching for it for 100,000 years. The old man retracted his smile and returned to his cold expression. Come in. Lord Longinu, what can I do for you? A young man who also had horns on his head and was dressed like a butler pushed open the door of the room, walked in, and bowed slightly. Prepare the carriage immediately. I want to see Lord Saul. The old man named Longarkinu said in a deep voice. Yes, Sir Longinu, I'll prepare it right away. The young man didn't dare to be negligent. He immediately responded and quickly retreated. Not long after, a luxurious carriage stopped in front of the courtyard. This carriage was pulled by 4 infernal warhorses. These infernal warhorses weren't ordinary horses. They were hellish creatures that emitted large amounts of flames and had boundless strength. Using 4 infernal warhorses to pull a carriage was indeed a waste of talent. One had to know that they were powerful creatures with the strength of level 12, which was the strength of a master. A master-level creature was already a first-class existence in an ordinary secondary plane. However, in the main plane of hell, it was merely a beast that pulled a carriage. The old man stepped onto the carriage, and the carriage rushed out of the courtyard at an extremely fast speed. Hell's main plane, in an ancient castle that was bigger than a mountain. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the gloomy sky. In front of the castle's gate was an extremely huge demonic head. The demonic head opened its mouth wide, as if to devour something. 6 long horns pierced the sky like sharp swords. Under the illumination of the lightning, it looked abnormally sinister. This was the Burning Legion's headquarters. The terrifying and powerful Burning Legion was the nightmare of every main plane. It was a powerful existence that made people's expressions change. In a huge hall, dozens of leaders of the Burning Legion were gathered here. Among them were dozens of abyssals at the realm of the gods. Each one of them was an overlord that ran amok in their own territory. These people were only the tip of the iceberg of the Burning Legion's terrifying strength. Sitting upright in the middle, the one sitting on the throne was a tall middle-aged man. He had a huge demonic body, and a pair of huge demonic wings on his back were casually folded. They were like two black longswords inserted into the ground. He half reclined on the wide throne and narrowed his eyes slightly. His lightning-like gaze constantly swept across the abyss devils below him as if he wasn't paying attention at all. Even though these demons were powerful God-realm experts, they were still in the middle of the middle-aged man's heart. They were trembling with fear in front of the middle-aged man, not daring to take a deep breath. The Burning Legion was holding a battle conference. The leaders were reporting the situation of the battle to the Burning Legion's great commander. Sitting in the middle, the one sitting on the throne, was the current Burning Legion's great commander, Thor. He was the most powerful demon in hell. Although Thor looked indifferent, he was listening very carefully and did not miss a single word. Suddenly, the heavy door opened with a creak. A demon pushed the door open and entered. "HM?" Thor frowned and slightly raised his head. A trace of killing intent flashed in his yellow eyes. This was the Burning Legion's highest military conference. Under normal circumstances, no one was allowed to enter. "Lord Thor, Mr. Longinu requests an audience." The demon's entrance interrupted the conference. He bowed slightly. Saul was about to scold him, but he changed his tone. "Oh? Is it Mr. Longinu? Quickly invite him in." "Yes, Lord Thor," the demon answered. "Mr. Longinu, Lord Thor invites you in." Just as he finished speaking, Longinu hurriedly stepped into the hall with a joyful expression. In the hall, all the demons stopped talking. They looked at the old man in front of them with doubtful expressions. This person's identity did not seem simple to be able to make Lord Thor interrupt an important meeting. Thor smiled. "Mr. Longinu, I can see from your expression that you seem to have brought us good news." "Yes, Lord Thor." Longinu stood in front of Thor's throne and said with joy, "I've found traces of Mr. Sauron." "What?" Longinu's words were no less than a clap of thunder on the ground, shocking everyone in the hall. "What? You said you found Mr. Sauron? Is it true? Hasn't Mr. Sauron been missing for 100,000 years? I heard that Mr. Sauron is dead." The demons in the hall began to talk at once, and they looked at Longinu with eyes full of suspicion. Sauron was the Grand Commander of the Burning Legion 100,000 years ago. He was also the elder brother of the current Grand Commander of the Burning Legion. He died in a war on the main plane 100,000 years ago. They only found Sauron's head, but the whereabouts of his body were unknown. For 100,000 years, the Burning Legion had been looking for Sauron's body in various main planes. Unfortunately, they could not find it. They even used the power of magic formations to sense Sauron's body. Longinu was the one who did this. He had been doing it for 100,000 years. This was also the reason why Thor interrupted the meeting to meet Longinu when he heard that he had come here to look for him. He was eager to know about his elder brother. "Mr. Longinu," at this time, a tall demon woman stood up. Her eyes were filled with surprise as she stammered, You really found my father?" "Yes, Your Highness Princess Sophia." Longinu bowed slightly and smiled. "I've already sensed the whereabouts of the Grand Commander's body. So, my father may be resurrected?" Sophia took a step forward, her voice trembling. Thor sighed. "Sophia, calm down. I'm as excited as you to find your elder brother's body. However, I still have to ask clearly." "Yes, uncle." Sophia calmed her excitement and took a step back. Thor nodded slightly. He thought that his niece was also someone who understood the big picture. Finding the whereabouts of her elder brother's body was only the first step. The real difficulty was finding his location. For example, if he was in the main plane of order, it would be meaningless to find him. Would the Burning Legion have to fight with the Legion of Holy Angels? Not to mention that the Burning Legion was weaker than the Legion of Holy Angels. Even Sauron himself might not be a match for the Archangel Michael. At this moment, huge waves surged in Thor's heart. No one knew the cause of his elder brother's death better than him. Thinking of that terrifying man, Thor's heart twitched slightly. 100,000 years ago, who was the strongest army of the evil faction in the main plane? Anyone would say that it was the Scourge army from the undead plane. At that time, the Scourge army was the leader of the evil faction. They were at the peak of their power and had defeated the righteous faction many times in the main plane. They had made great contributions to the evil faction. At that time, the Burning Legion was also under the leadership of the Burning Legion. It was a pity that the Burning Legion couldn't see the situation clearly. They thought that the Burning Legion was strong and overestimated their own abilities. They repeatedly provoked the Scourge army in an attempt to steal the position of the evil faction's First Legion. The moment the Scourge army stepped into hell, they realized that they were wrong. They were terribly wrong. The Burning Legion that they were so proud of, the brother who was known as the strongest demon in hell, was destroyed by the Scourge army led by that man. The entire main plane of hell had fallen. That man had even killed his older brother, Sauron, right in front of him. In order to prevent Sauron from being revived, that man had sealed Sauron's head and taken Sauron's body away, occupying the entire mortal plane of hell. At that time, this had caused a huge commotion in the mortal plane. That man was the Lich King. He also had another name, Hermes. However, the Scourge army quickly retreated from hell. It was said that he went to find trouble with the righteous faction's legion of holy angels. Later, news spread that the Lich King had been killed by an archangel of the legion of holy angels. With the power of a single legion, the Scourge army was able to heavily injure the two strongest armies of the evil faction and the righteous faction. It was easy to imagine how terrifying the Scourge army was. Saul knew that if it weren't for the Burning Legion's provocation, which depleted part of the Scourge's strength, the outcome of the battle between the Scourge and the Holy Angel army would still be uncertain. In the end, the Burning Legion and the Scourge army's battle was won by Michael. However, it wasn't so easy to take advantage of the Scourge army. It was said that the Legion of Holy Angels was also heavily injured and took a long time to recover. But that's good. That guy is still dead in the end. Thor sighed. Thinking about how powerful the Lich King was, he still had a lingering fear. He would never forget the humiliation of kneeling in front of him and begging for mercy 100,000 years ago. The entire meeting hall was silent. All the demons knew that Lord Thor was thinking about something and didn't dare to interrupt him. Thor raised his head and was slightly startled. Right, where were we? We were talking about the location of my father's corpse. Sophia reminded. Oh right. Mr. Longinu, may I ask where Lord Sauron's corpse is right now? Thor stared closely at Longinu and asked softly. It's in a place called the Noah continent. Longinu said honestly. I sensed a familiar energy fluctuation from Lord Sauron's head. Although the energy fluctuation was very weak, I did sense it. The Noah continent sounds like a secondary plane. Thor muttered to himself, and then his face relaxed. As long as it wasn't a primary plane, it wouldn't be a problem. With the Burning Legion's strength, they could occupy that place and then turn it upside down. It wouldn't be difficult to find Commander Sauron's corpse. Thor paused for a moment. Zabel, where is that secondary plane called the Noah continent? How are the forces there distributed? Yes, Lord Thor. A young demon with dark green skin walked out and flipped through the book in his hand. After a long time, he said, the Noah continent is an undeveloped place. The major primary planes don't pay much attention to it. There are mainly branch forces from the Order primary plane, the Power primary plane, the Life primary plane, the Elemental primary plane, and some powerful native magic beasts. The young demon named Zabel looked carefully. Other than that, there's nothing else. All the demons in the hall breathed a sigh of relief. If the Noah continent only had such strength, they wouldn't need to spend too much effort at all. Only a small team's strength would be enough to deal with it. The Noah continent. The Noah continent. Sophia kept repeating this name. Suddenly, her eyes lit up and she stood up. Uncle, do you remember that we once investigated the Noah continent? But because someone didn't do a good job, we couldn't find my father's trace, and Uncle lost a demon avatar. When Thor heard this, he looked a little stunned. Then he patted his head and remembered. You mean that guy Keith? He turned into an elf and lurked in the Noah continent. Later, he was found by the elves and killed. Thinking of Keith, Thor's eyes still had a trace of hatred. He would always remember that guy who used the divine power of death. The divine power of death? Ah, right, the divine power of death. Thinking of this, Thor's heart thumped. He immediately stood up and said, Zabel, immediately check if there are any branches of undead forces in the Noah continent. No! Zabel waved the book in his hand. According to the information I obtained, since the birth of the Noah continent, there has never been an undead force setting foot there. Could it be my misconception? Thor couldn't help but have some doubts. After all, he was far away in hell at that time and didn't know the situation of the Noah continent's avatar. At this time, a demon stepped forward, walked in front of Thor, and respectfully bowed. Lord Thor, I request to lead a squadron to the Noah continent and find the corpse of the great commander. That demon's eyes burned with a raging fighting spirit, and a cruel and sinister smile revealed his thoughts. Hee. Conquering an undeveloped subplane requires a squadron of the Burning Legion? Just as that demon's voice fell, another demon sneered. Lord Thor, send me. This kind of simple mission, I only need a small squad. Lord Thor, send me. Conquering the Noah continent, I only need a small squad. Lord Thor, leave this kind of thing to me. Seeing that there was merit to be gained, all the demons volunteered. This kind of simple mission with great merit was naturally the object of everyone's competition. As for the Noah continent, in their eyes, it was simply an unrated place. They didn't need to be too strong to conquer it. Silence. At this time, Thor gently waved his hand, and all the demons quieted down. At this time, they discovered that Her Highness Princess Sophia had stood up at some point. Sophia, do you plan to go to the Noah continent? Thor asked indifferently. Yes, uncle. Sophia calmly stared into Thor's eyes. Please grant me my wish, uncle. Thor muttered to himself for a while before finally nodding. Since you've already made the request, I won't stop you. If you want to go, then go. Lead a small squad and bring back your father's corpse. Thank you, uncle. Sophia heard and clearly heaved a sigh of relief. A trace of disappointment flashed in the eyes of all the demons. In terms of qualifications, no one could compare to Her Highness Sophia. She was the daughter of the great commander, and it was only right and proper for her to bring back her father's corpse. Also, Thor glanced at her, slightly raising his head and leaning forward. You must also conquer the Noah continent and make it our Burning Legion's stronghold. Yes, uncle. I will definitely do it. Sophia took a deep breath and said, her tone filled with determination. Very quickly, Sophia bowed and took her leave. She was going to lead the Burning Legion on an expedition to the Noah continent, and she still needed to make some preparations. When she walked to the door, Thor's voice sounded in her ears. Bring Mr. Ronsanu over as well. He's the best dark magus, and I believe he can help you, Hell's main plane, in a small valley of the Burning Legion's headquarters. The once empty valley was now filled with countless hell creatures. They were densely packed, and there were at least a few million of them. The Burning Legion that had been scattered all over the place began to gather. These hell creatures were all ferocious and powerful existences, constantly roaring and howling. If not for their commanding officer's orders, they would have already been unable to hold themselves back and started killing. Dozens of female demons flew across the sky and quietly landed on a high platform in the valley. The one in the lead was Sophia. Your Highness Princess Sophia, we are ready. A tall middle-aged man took large strides forward to greet him and said respectfully. Sophia nodded. That person came from hell and was part of the Cthulhu tribe, and was as famous as the demons. Although their individual strength and battle strength could not compare to the demons, their tribe members outnumbered the demons by a few times. Sophia nodded, and then looked at the old man behind the Cthulhu king. "Mr. Ronsanu, we can begin." "Yes, Your Highness Princess Sophia." Ronsanu bowed, and then took out a long magic wand from his spatial ring, and continuously chanted in a low voice. Hu, with the radiance of the dark magic, the space around the valley began to throb. Ka. Under Ronsanu's efforts, the space finally began to loosen, and a crack appeared. Boom! The space finally completely split open, and countless spatial energy kept spinning, forming a huge vortex. It was a spatial tunnel that connected to the main plane of hell. At the end of the spatial tunnel was the Noah continent. Roar! Countless hell creatures cheered, and let out a deafening roar in unison, their violent and bloodthirsty aura surging into the clouds. "Father, did you hear that? Your daughter is coming to find you." Sophia was equally excited. She hugged a wooden box tightly in her hands, and in that wooden box was her father's head, Commander Sauron's head. Sophia took a deep breath, and her face returned to its cold expression. Sophia looked at the millions of burning legion troops below, and gave her first order. "Target, Noah continent, depart." Boom, boom, boom. Following Sophia's order, the entire earth shook and countless troops marched. They stepped on the red ground under their feet, and entered the spatial tunnel, heading towards an unknown corner. Kill, kill, kill. These creatures that only knew how to destroy and kill, only had this thought in their minds. It was as if destruction and killing were the only meaning of their existence. Hellfire burns, never to be extinguished. Wherever the burning legion goes, leave nothing behind. Leave nothing behind. Kill everything. Burn everything. Destroy everything. Kill, kill, kill. Soul-stirring slogans filled the air, as if they were burning with an unyielding will. The burning legion that dominated hell finally stepped through the spatial tunnel and arrived. And as one of their targets, the Noah continent, had to face an unknown fate and a huge disaster. Chapter 682. On the vast plains, a gentle wind blew, blowing the grass down and making a rustling sound. The sunset shone on the vast plains, gilding the plains with a layer of gold. The mountains were like the sea, and the setting sun was like blood. It was a desolate scene. A black flag was stuck in the soil, fluttering gently with the wind. The blood-red skull flag. This war flag, which had shaken the entire main plain 100,000 years ago, was now stuck in the middle of this vast, uninhabited plain. The ferocious skull pattern on the flag had been damaged beyond recognition, as if it was telling of the tragedy of the war. The blood on the ground had yet to coagulate, and the air was filled with the pungent smell of blood. Plop! A crow flew over from an unknown direction and landed on the ground beside the flag. Its sharp beak gently tapped on the ground. It pecked at the minced meat on the ground, raising its head from time to time and looking around with a vigilant gaze. At this moment, the crow's gaze fell on the small puddle beside it. The small puddle was formed by fresh blood and emitted a faint smell of blood. Hum! At this moment, the small puddle formed by the fresh blood emitted a wave of ripples. The crow hesitated for a moment and did not move. However, its movements had stopped. Hum! The small puddle emitted another wave of ripples. At the same time, the ground trembled slightly. This tremor did not seem to stop, and the movement became louder and louder. It was close. It was getting closer and closer. As if something was rapidly approaching, it emitted a dull sound. The earth in the twilight finally began to tremble. Caw! The frightened crow finally could not hold back. With a strange cry, it flapped its wings and shot into the air like a black arrow. Boom! A heavy meat grinder crossed the ravine and landed heavily on the ground, emitting a loud noise. The meat grinder made of bones emitted a white glow under the sun. Boom, boom, boom. On the endless plains, countless undead armies were marching. Skeletons, ghouls, zombies, death knights. They formed a black torrent, majestic and mighty. Banners fluttered in the wind, and a murderous aura soared into the sky. Bat-like gargoyles swept across the sky, emitting ear-piercing cries. On the other side of the plain there was a rock that jutted out. A human swordsman wearing a red cloak slowly stood up. His whole body was covered in heavy armor, only revealing a pair of bright eyes. He held a shield in one hand and a one-handed heavy sword in the other. Through the crack in his heavy armor helmet, the human swordsman narrowed his eyes slightly, revealing a look of deep disgust. At this moment, the human swordsman moved. He slowly raised the sword in his hand and swung it down. Kill! In an instant, the sounds of killing shook the heavens and the earth. Behind the human swordsman, countless soldiers rushed out. They were also wearing heavy armor, and the bright red cross emblem on their breastplates was particularly eye-catching. The brave human swordsmen didn't choose to retreat in the face of the undead soldiers. They charged forward like a white flood, drowning everything in their path. Boom! Finally, the black torrent and the white torrent fiercely collided, and the momentum shook the heavens and the earth. Boom, boom, boom! At this moment, the gloomy sky suddenly seemed to split open as countless fireballs fell from the sky. Ah! With a burst of white light, Ron's heart trembled, and he sat up immediately. Huff! Huff! Ron was lying in the tent, gasping for breath. His face was abnormally pale, and there was a trace of fear on his face. Bright moon, starry sky. So it was just a dream. Ron's heart calmed down, and he wiped away the sweat on his forehead. At this moment, he realized that his sweat had unknowingly soaked his clothes. Is this really a dream? Why is this dream so realistic? Ron took a deep breath, looking a little lost. For some reason, his mood was unusually irritable. You're awake. Just as Ron was thinking, a sparkling and white lotus arm wrapped around him. It was Kadena. At this moment, she was lying beside Ron, half of her breasts exposed, and a pair of beautiful big eyes blinking at him as she asked with concern. Did you have that nightmare again? Ron hesitated for a moment, then nodded gently. Since the all-out war with the Holy See 6 years ago, he had that nightmare more than once. In the nightmare, the army of the Scourge Church, which symbolized the Black Torrent, and the army of the Holy See, which symbolized the White Torrent, fought a decisive battle on a plain. But in the decisive battle, it was as if the end of the world had come. The sky split open and countless fireballs fell from the sky, and there was also a flash of light. Countless times, Ron wanted to see what was in the light, but unfortunately, he did not see anything. Kadena frowned slightly. It's said that dreams are a sign of reality. Do you think this dream is a sign of something? I don't know. I don't want to know what it's a sign of. Ron shook his head and sighed. What I'm thinking about now is, how can we end this long war as soon as possible? The war between the Scourge Church and the Holy See had been going on for 6 years. In these 6 years, both sides had been attacking each other again and again, vowing to destroy the other side. The Holy Roman Empire and the Achaemenid Empire had been fighting for control of the border. Often, a city that had just been conquered by the Scourge Church would be reclaimed by the Holy See the next day. The Holy See wanted to destroy the Scourge Church, but how could the Scourge Church not want to destroy the Holy See? War, once involved in religion, was often extremely tragic. Over the past 6 years, the war between the two major religions in the human world had caused heavy casualties among the soldiers. Countless families had been torn apart, and the people had been displaced. However, both sides had no choice but to continue fighting and wearing each other down until one side was destroyed. However, because the strength of both sides was too close, Ron slowly understood that it was a complete fantasy to destroy the Holy See in a short period of time under the command of Andrew, the Son of God, and dozens of angels. Ron had wanted to end this long war countless times, or at least return to the line of control between both sides and enjoy a short period of peace. Even though Juliana did not say it, Ron knew that the Abia Empire's financial support had reached its limit. However, once this war was started, it was not something that Ron could end just because he wanted to. If he let his guard down even for a moment, the other side would fiercely bite him, eager to kill him. Whether Ron was willing or not, he had to continue fighting this war. He had no choice. Kadena hesitated for a moment. Ron, actually, have you thought of going to the Assembly or Undine? If they can stand on our side, I think this war will end in a good way. The Assembly? Ron was startled and then smiled bitterly. Ron knew very well that the Assembly, as the highest ruling power in the Noah continent, was unexpectedly silent about the war between both sides. Ron originally thought that at least one of the dragons, the orcs, and the elves would stand on his side, but in reality, he was quickly disappointed. Whether it was his grandfather, Firthare, or his fiancée in name, Frigga, or even High Priestess Undine, who he had saved from the elves, none of them made a statement. As for the power of the beast god, there was no need to count on it. Ron did not have a life-and-death relationship with him or the beastmen. Ron's heart instantly turned cold, but he quickly understood the Assembly's intentions. What was the Assembly? It was a world power led by magical beasts, and the most powerful of them were the magical beasts. They were also the ones who ruled the entire Noah continent. The magical beasts had always looked down on the human world, but unknowingly, 3 Godrealm powerhouses had appeared in the human world. This was not a good thing for the magical beasts. If these 3 Godrealm powerhouses formed an unbreakable alliance, then the history of the Noah continent would be rewritten. Humans would rise to become the most powerful race, and the dragons, orcs, and elves would all have to stand aside. This was something the magical beasts, who were used to being high and mighty, did not want to see. This was also the reason why the magical beasts of the Assembly had been watching from the sidelines, and were happy to see the humans kill each other. Ron had also thought of looking for the planar manager of the Noah continent, Lord Noah. With his reputation and strength, he believed that he could mediate the war between the Scourge Church and the Holy See. Unfortunately, every time he visited the planar space for 6 years, he would receive news that Lord Noah was not there. It seems that this war will have to continue. Ron shook his head. He lifted the blanket on his body, stood up, and gently put on his clothes. He walked to the window and stared out. Ron, the final battle is tomorrow. It's still early. Don't you want to sleep? Kadena asked softly. I can't sleep. Ron shook his head. Tomorrow was the final battle between him and Andrew. At this moment, he was not sleepy at all. He paused for a moment and then asked, How's Grandpa Homelin now? Grandpa Homelin drank the potion of life and is now asleep. The church has arranged for a few necromancers to take care of him, Kadena replied softly. I think there shouldn't be any problems. Homelin had gone alone to ambush the Holy See's camp, but he was discovered by Andrew and had a great battle with him. Although Homelin could summon a frost dragon, he was still no match for Andrew. In that battle, he was severely injured. Fortunately, he was strong and intelligent. It was not easy for him to escape from Andrew's hands, but he almost lost his life. Thinking of this, Ron's heart was filled with anger. He clenched his fists tightly, and his face became incomparably ferocious. His eyes revealed a strong desire to fight. Chapter 683. The Titan Plateau had always been the land of the military in human history. Whoever controlled the Titan Plateau would have a strategic advantage. At this moment, on the Titan Plateau, banners fluttered in the wind, and battle cries shook the sky. The Holy See and the Scourge Church had gathered more than 80% of their forces, intending to annihilate the other party in one fell swoop. Countless undead roared, and Death Knights rode skeletal horses to patrol back and forth. In the sky, a large group of gargoyles flew past from time to time. The top of the mysterious 10 Victories stone statue was constantly emitting light, sprinkling on the undead creatures, turning into specks of starlight that scattered down. On the other side there was the army of the Holy See. They were lined up neatly, and a pair of cold eyes stared ahead. Their seemingly calm faces were filled with religious fanaticism. Dozens of angels floated quietly in the air, flapping their beautiful holy wings, motionlessly confronting the army of hundreds of thousands of undead. Swoosh! At this moment, a ray of light suddenly lit up beside him. It was Andrew, who was dressed in military attire. "Your Highness Andrew, you're here," Rodewald greeted with a smile. Andrew nodded faintly. His expression was as cold as an iceberg. "We'd attack, we attack." Rodewald was stunned. It was always the undead that attacked first. Since the undead could summon a large number of skeletons, they had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers. In every battle, the undead were always the first to attack. However, numbers did not represent combat power. Those low-level skeletal warriors would quickly crumble before the soldiers of the Holy See. "That's right." Andrew's eyes revealed a strong desire to fight. "It's our turn now." "Yes, Your Highness Andrew." Rodewald bowed slightly, and then waved to the commander of the Holy See. Boom! The army of the Holy See moved, shouting orderly slogans. They surged forward like a white tide, their momentum shaking the heavens and the earth. Ron stood quietly on a high platform built with several wooden pillars, coldly watching the movements in the distance. "Young master, the Holy See is attacking," Vivian reminded him softly. "Very good." A cold smile appeared on Ron's face. He said proudly, "Andrew, I didn't expect you to be so impatient. Since that's the case, I'll fulfill your wish." Shaw, shaw, shaw. As he spoke, the undead moved. Countless skeletons, zombies, ghouls, and other creatures slowly moved forward. Smoke rose into the air like a moving pitch-black sea. The gargoyles were flying slowly, but they were flying in the air at their fastest speed. Like a dark cloud, they arrived above the soldiers of the Holy Church. The gargoyles shrieked and spat out corrosive acid from their mouth. "Careful, the gargoyles are coming!" "Crossbowmen! Where are the crossbowmen? Quickly shoot them to death!" "Mages, priests, quickly concentrate your firepower and eliminate these annoying fellows." The arrival of the gargoyles attracted the attention of the soldiers of the Holy Church. They screamed, and countless arrows and spells were fired into the sky, creating bright fireworks. Boom! 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 The battle began. Countless gargoyles were shot by the arrows from the ground. They fell to the ground and turned into clouds of smoke. Some of the gargoyles that were heavily injured but not dead turned into stone. However, they were quickly destroyed by the soldiers of the Holy See. There was a period of time when the mysterious, terrifying, and powerful undead magic caused people to panic. However, after 6 years of war, the soldiers of the Holy See had figured out the characteristics of the various types of undead. They were no longer afraid. Charge, kill! At this moment, the undead army had madly rushed forward. The Death Knights charging at the front had already crashed into the wall of soldiers, tearing through their defenses and killing without restraint. Healing, divine protection, evil halo, shadow assault. Boom, boom, boom. Countless light magic and necromancy magic collided with each other, and countless severed limbs flew into the air. The white angel flag and the black skull flag crisscrossed each other in close combat, and the battle was exceptionally bitter. A necromancer was preparing to resurrect the corpse of the dead, but was cut in two by a swordsman. The swordsman did not even have time to sheathe his sword before he was killed by an undead assassin that had been lying in ambush. Shouts and screams filled the sky. There was no room for compromise in a war between religions. Regardless of whether it was the soldiers of the Holy See or the Scourge Church, they all had a devout heart. They raised their butcher's knives high and killed until their eyes turned red. One by one, bodies fell into a pool of blood. This was the final battle. Everyone was putting their lives on the line. The sun in the sky seemed to not be watching this tragic battle, quietly hiding in the clouds. The corner of Ron's mouth twitched a few times. In a short period of time, there were countless casualties. The Scourge Church suffered heavy losses, but the losses were still manageable. Similarly, the Holy See was the same. Fortunately, the powerhouses of the sacred domain were not at a disadvantage. Vivian, Kay, Lin, Kadena, and other powerhouses of the sacred domain had all attacked, fighting with the angels of the Holy See. Shea's opponent was a slightly older middle-aged angel. What surprised Ron was that he was actually at the peak of the sacred domain. In addition, Kay, Lin, Vivian, and the others were also fighting with an angel each. At this time, Ron saw Andrew, who was in the middle of a fight. Andrew also happened to look at Ron. Kill! The two did not waste any words and rushed at each other at almost the same time. Andrew's body turned into a ray of light, and Ron's body turned into smoke. In the next moment, not far away in the sky, the two fiercely collided. Boom! Black soul power and white Guangming power suddenly spread out in an instant. The momentum was terrifying. In the blink of an eye, the two had exchanged dozens of blows, each of them fatal. Abyssal skeletal dragon. Ron silently chanted an incantation, and more than 10 abyssal skeletal dragons appeared in an instant, roaring and rushing at Andrew. Divine strike! Andrew took a deep breath, and his body turned into a ray of light, constantly moving and jumping in space. Every time his sword slashed down, an abyssal skeletal dragon would scream and turn into smoke and disappear. This guy is stronger than before. Ron sucked in a breath of cold air. He held the dragon bone staff in his hand, and was about to summon the strongest frost dragon. At this time, Andrew had already fiercely rushed over with the holy sword in his hand. Death hand! Without waiting for Andrew to get close, Ron loudly shouted, and his soul power crazily seeped out. Not long after, a huge black hand grabbed at Andrew. Sword of Justice! Andrew was not to be outdone. He fused with his sword, and the wings on his back spread to the maximum. The flames on his body sharply rose, as dazzling as the sun in the sky. Boom! The death hand collided with the sword of justice, and like melting snow, it exploded one after another. A powerful light pierced through the sky, and fiercely exploded towards Ron. Damn it! Ron cursed inwardly. He had been careless for a moment, but he had been injured. Andrew took a step forward. Justice must prevail over evil. Foolish human, resisting a god is not a wise move. You will pay the price with your life. Andrew's eyes flashed with a trace of ruthlessness. Come, accept the wrath of a god, sword of divine punishment. Just as Andrew's voice fell, the sword light that filled the sky suddenly gathered together. He slightly raised his hand, and it turned into lightning in the sky, emitting a cold might as if a god had descended. Not good! Ron inwardly cried out. He clenched his teeth, and countless soul power surged out. At this moment, he was using his death power. Book of Death's 5th chapter, Death Vortex. A small cyan ball rose from his hand and rose into the air. It constantly rotated, and rapidly grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. The death vortex began to devour the powerful energy in the surrounding space, and even the light was not spared. Facing that cyan ball, even Andrew had no choice but to be cautious. The decisive battle between the Holy See and the Scourge Church had reached its climax. At this moment, even their most powerful God Realm powerhouses had been mobilized. The clash between Guangming's and Death's divine power caused the mountains and rivers to change color, and the earth to crack. It was as if heaven and earth could not accommodate the existence of any power. Ron and Andrew desperately urged the power in their bodies. At this moment, he even used soul ignition. The decisive battle between the two had reached a critical moment. At this moment, a power that did not belong to this place quietly descended. Boom! A thunderous sound resounded through the horizon. The sky seemed to split open, and a slight vibration came from the space. Space collapsed, and then countless vortexes appeared in the sky. The dark holes emitted an enormous power that made one's heart palpitate. Crack! Ron and Andrew simultaneously stopped fighting. The two of them looked at the sky, their eyes full of horror. The Scourge Church and Holy See soldiers, who were fiercely fighting on the ground, also seemed to have forgotten about the enemies they were fighting. They stared blankly at the vortexes in the sky, dumbstruck. This is a spatial passage. Andrew's face sank. The opening of a spatial passage meant that something was coming. Perhaps it was a person, or perhaps it was an army. Ron's body trembled uncontrollably. He clenched his fists tightly, and his eyes were filled with disbelief and fear. The sky split open, and the wind and clouds changed color. Everything in front of him was so similar to that dream. That's right, it was that dream. That dream of countless times in the past 6 years. Boom! Finally, a huge fireball appeared abruptly from the vortexes in the sky. It fell to the ground like a meteor and made a huge noise. Boom, boom, boom. Countless fireballs fell from the sky and smashed into the ground. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. Everything turned into ashes. Destruction. Powerful destructive power, at the final moment of the decisive battle between the Scourge Church and the Holy See, the burning legion from hell. Chapter 684. The earth was turned into an upside-down bowl due to the huge impact. The fireball burned fiercely, turning the surrounding area into a sea of fire. Ka. At this time, countless fireballs moved in the sea of fire. It slowly stood up. It was a 5-meter-tall flame giant wrapped in flames. Its tall and strong body was as hard as a rock. No, it was just a moving rock. That rock stood up shakily and attacked the soldier of the Holy Church who was closest to it. Oh my God, what is that? Run, it's very strong. In an instant, the soldier was smashed into meat paste by the flame giant. The sudden attack stunned everyone. No one had expected that the flaming giant would actually possess the strength of a saint level. Countless fireballs fell from the spatial passage and landed on the ground, turning into ferocious and terrifying hell creatures. There were so many of them that it was like a sea of fire. The hell creatures rushed out of the spatial passage like an unstoppable tide, quickly occupying the entire Titan plateau. There were 3-headed hellhounds with wings on their backs, ferocious imps that looked similar to demons. There were magma monsters with burning flames all over their bodies. There were succubi with the face of an angel and the body of a devil. They were born with the ability to charm people. The flames of hell burned fiercely, and the destructive power of the flames spread in all directions. Everywhere they went, everything was turned into scorched earth. What kind of monster is this? Oh my God! They're attacking us! Fight back, fight back! The hell creatures that had just arrived in the Noah continent immediately showed their ferocity and brutality. They did not care about the fierce battle between the two sides at all. Instead, they were like madmen, biting anyone they caught, and could not wait to attack the Holy See's army. Although they did not know the origin of the other party, the Holy See's army was not easy to deal with. Under the protection of countless paladins, they quickly counterattacked. The Scourge Church also fought with the hell creatures. They could no longer care about the Holy See. The ferocious hell creatures had now become their main enemy. Ron stared blankly at the flames descending from the sky as if he had been struck dumb. That mysterious dream had finally become reality in front of him. However, why was that aura so familiar? At this moment, Ron's body shook violently, and his eyes widened in disbelief. That's a demon. He saw it. Ron finally saw it. From the vast sky, a huge figure with horns on its head and a muscular body descended. He finally knew what it was. Devil. A demon from hell. Ron couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart when he recalled the ferocious and tyrannical appearance of the merfolk Princess Vitala, who had turned into a demon. That's right, they are demons, demons from hell. At this moment, Andrew, the Son of God, took over the conversation. He didn't attack Ron. Instead, he looked at the spatial tunnel in the distance with a thoughtful expression. They're the infamous Burning Legion of the main plane. When he said this, Andrew's face showed deep fear. Burning Legion? When Ron heard this, his body shook involuntarily. At this moment, the descending hell creatures had already raised their flag. It was a picture of a blazing flame that vaguely resembled the head of a demon. Your Highness Andrew! Your Highness Andrew! At this moment, the voice of the divine angel guard Captain Rodewald sounded in Ron and Andrew's ears. He quickly flapped his wings and flew to Andrew's side. He glanced at Ron and hesitated before speaking. Your Highness Andrew, the Burning Legion from hell has arrived. I understand. Andrew quickly thought for a moment before saying, We'll leave now. What? You're leaving? Ron didn't expect that Andrew, the conceited son of God, would actually choose to shrink back at this juncture. This wasn't in line with his character. Was the Burning Legion that powerful? Andrew turned to look at Ron and hesitated for a moment before saying coldly, That's right, I'm leaving. But before I leave, I have to give you a piece of advice. You'd better leave the Noah continent immediately. Why? Seeing that Andrew's expression was unusually grave, Ron's heart tightened. He could tell that Andrew wasn't joking. Andrew didn't look at Ron and instead stared fixedly at the Burning Legion that was constantly descending from the distance. He sighed softly. The Noah continent is finished. The Burning Legion isn't easy to communicate with. They're violent, bloodthirsty, and only know how to destroy and destroy. Whichever subplane they go to, that subplane's creatures will be slaughtered. From what I know, they've already destroyed many subplanes. Andrew slowly retracted his gaze. Although I don't know why the Burning Legion would descend on this tiny Noah continent, I believe that the Noah continent definitely has something that can attract them. Ron, if you want to preserve your life, flee immediately. What? Ron's heart sank when he heard that. He didn't expect the Noah continent to attract such a calamity. However, it was impossible for Ron to leave the Noah continent. This was his home, his hometown, his family, and his scourge church. Although they hadn't directly fought, Ron knew that Andrew wasn't lying. Ron frowned and asked, unwilling to give up, Is there no other way? Or we can defeat them? Andrew sneered when he heard that. Defeat them? Don't joke around. They're the true Infernal Legion. Your Highness Andrew, why are you telling him so much? Rodewald took over and glared fiercely at Ron. This frog at the bottom of the well doesn't know the strength of the Infernal Legion. Let's go, Your Highness Andrew. I promised your father that I'll protect you even if I have to give up my life. Rodewald persuaded. Andrew nodded and left with him. The Holy Sea Army also began to break away from the Burning Legion and slowly retreated. The Burning Legion? Ron sighed helplessly. Looking at the countless hell creatures in the distance, a trace of worry flashed in his eyes. Ron, at this time, Vivian, Kadena, and the others rushed over. Vivian's body was covered in blood, and her clothes had several large holes. Ron could tell at a glance that Vivian had been injured and had only recovered after drinking a health potion. Young Master, those creatures that came out of nowhere are attacking everyone they see. Whether it's the Holy See or our Scourge Church, they're very strong. Many of us have been injured. Right now the Holy See has begun to retreat. Should we retreat as well? Vivian spoke like a machine gun. Retreat. Ron could not help but laugh bitterly. Retreat? Where could they retreat to? According to Andrew, the Burning Legion's target was the entire Noah continent. Ron, do you know where these monsters came from? Kadena saw Ron's hesitation and asked directly. Yes, I know. Ron nodded. They're the Burning Legion from the main plane of Infernal Realm. Burning Legion? Vivian, Kadena, Lin, and the others were shocked and cried out in unison. That's right. They're the real main battle legion. Ron's eyes were fixed on the battlefield in the distance. At this time, the Burning Legion had already gained a foothold on the Titan Plateau and started to attack the Scourge army. What was shocking was that the Scourge army, which was already very strong in Ron's eyes, could not withstand the Burning Legion's attack and was being beaten back repeatedly. The Burning Legion's strength was terrifying. Looking at the ferocious faces of the demons, Ron gritted his teeth and made up his mind. Instead of watching the Noah continent being destroyed, he would rather fight to the death. No matter what, the Noah continent could not fall into the hands of the demons. Everyone, listen up. Pass down my order. Ron suddenly raised his hand and shouted loudly. His eyes burned with an inextinguishable fighting spirit. It's time to fight. Everyone's heart trembled and they pricked up their ears. They knew that Ron was about to give the order to attack. Just as Ron was about to give the order to attack, a powerful aura that made one's heart palpitate came through the spatial passage. In an instant, the entire space seemed to be frozen. Everyone felt as if a heavy stone was pressing down on their hearts, making it difficult for them to breathe. This is, Ron's eyes suddenly widened. Yes, his spiritual sense had already sensed that it was an extremely powerful force. The demons from the divine realm that had descended on the Noah continent were not just a few, but a group. Although Ron already had the strength of the God realm, and he wouldn't lose to Vitara at the beginning, what he had to face now was a group of demons. No matter how strong Ron was, he was only one person. The rest of the Scourge Church would have to die with him. At this moment, Ron's entire body was trembling, and his heart was filled with extreme fear. He finally knew what the so-called main battle army of the main plane was. He finally knew why God's son Andrew, who had always been conceited, would choose to avoid and not be willing to face the Burning Legion. It was because the Burning Legion was too powerful. There were dozens of divine realm demons that had descended on the Noah continent, and there were countless powerhouses from the sacred domain. What was even more terrifying was that such a powerful force was only the tip of the iceberg of the Burning Legion's strength. Such a powerful force was not something the Scourge Church, no, even the entire Noah continent could resist. In front of the Burning Legion, Ron's old rival, Andrew's Sacred Angel Guard, was just a child's play. This was only his personal guard force. The current Burning Legion was the true main battle army. Its strength made people despair. At this moment, Ron's face was ashen, and his heart was filled with despair. He raised his hand high, and could no longer suppress it. Facing the powerful Burning Legion, Ron's will to fight had already been crushed, and he could no longer summon the slightest thought of resisting. Ron! Kadena's face was filled with worry, and she gently grabbed Ron's hand. Let's retreat immediately. Ron, who had originally planned to attack, immediately changed his mind and finally gave the order to retreat. At this moment, his heart was filled with a sense of powerlessness. Chapter 685. So this is the Noah continent? Sophia, who had descended from the main plane of hell, stepped out of the spatial tunnel and slowly landed on the ground. Yes, Your Highness Sophia, this is the Noah continent. The Cthulhu king beside her replied respectfully. His name was Ravens. The air here is quite fresh. Sophia took a deep breath, her beautiful face showing a joyful expression. Oh right, Your Highness. The Cthulhu king Ravens thought for a while and said, when we arrived in the Noah continent just now, we discovered that there were two native armies fighting. One side was using the divine power of Guangming from the main plane of order, the other side was using the power of the undead. Ravens paused for a moment, smiled and continued. Both sides had a divine powerhouse, but they have disappeared now. It seems that they know how powerful we are. Undead? Sophia's eyes flashed and she nodded. The information that Keith brought was wrong. The Noah continent has always had undead powers. Raven straightened his back and smiled. So what if they are undead? Your Highness Sophia, I don't think you need to worry at all. With the Scourge army falling behind, the undead are like a toothless tiger. They can no longer be arrogant. The main army of the undead main plane now only knows how to kill each other. They are nothing to worry about. Of course I know that. Sophia smiled faintly. Naturally, there was a reason why she hated the undead. In a place called the Snow Orchid Continent, the demon seed that she had condensed with her blood essence was actually destroyed by a necromancer sacred magus who used the divine power of death. This matter had always been in her heart, and she hated the undead as well. At this moment, Sophia tilted her head slightly. Mr. Longinu, please come over. Yes, Your Highness Sophia. What are your orders? The dark magus Longinu walked over quickly and bowed slightly. At this moment, he was a little uneasy. Didn't you say that my father's body was in the Noah continent? Now that we have arrived in the Noah continent, may I ask where my father's body is now? Sophia asked directly. The most important thing now was to find the body of Grand Commander Sauron, who was her father. It's like this. Hearing this, Longinu broke out in a cold sweat. Your Highness, before I came, I could still sense the Grand Commander's aura, but now it has disappeared. What did you say? Sophia's eyebrows furrowed. She raised her voice. Grand Commander Longinu, you said my father's body is in the Noah continent. According you, I brought the Burning Legion, but now you are telling me you can't find it? What the hell are you doing? When he was in hell, Longinu had some feeling, but this feeling was extremely weak. Even he was not sure whether it was an illusion or not. But now that he had arrived in the Noah continent, he could not feel it at all. He did not know how to explain it to Princess Sophia. This demon princess was not a kind person. Your Highness, please calm down, Longinu stammered. I think the Grand Commander's body must be covered by something. Please give me some time. I will definitely find the Grand Commander's body. I don't care. Sophia was so angry that the demon wings on her back were wide open. Her mouth revealed her sharp teeth, and she could not help but roar. Longinu, I will only give you 5 days. 5 days. If you can't find my father's body, come and accept your death. Cold sweat flowed down Longinu's face. At this moment, he was so regretful that his intestines turned green. If he had known this would happen, he would not have fought for that credit. At the same time, he was also curious as to who had hidden the Grand Commander's body. Yes, Your Highness, I will do my best. I will do my best. Longinu nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. Humph. Sophia did not even look at him. She walked past him in large strides. After walking a few steps, she stopped and turned around to call out, Master Ravens! Here. Ravens took a step forward and answered in a clear voice. Sophia raised her head slightly. A trace of killing intent flashed in her eyes. She said calmly, There is no need to keep the natives of the Noah continent alive. 10 days. I will give you 10 days to kill all the natives of the Noah continent and then dig 3 feet into the ground. No matter what, I will find my father's body. Yes, Your Highness. A trace of killing intent flashed in the eyes of the Cthulhu King Ravens. Leave this to me. Roland Empire, in a place called Pogli Town. Pogli Town was located in the north of the Roland Empire. It was remote, cold, and unknown. Even on the map of the Roland Empire, this place could not be found. Because this place was not valued, it was rarely affected by the war. The faces of the townspeople were always filled with happy smiles at all times. The Harvest Festival was the most important festival in Pogley Town. Every year at this time, the townspeople of Pogley Town, regardless of gender or age, would dress up in colorful festive clothes and dance happily in the town's plaza to celebrate the joy of the harvest. On this day, the young and handsome lads also took the opportunity to express their love to their loved ones. The beautiful girls also changed from their usual shyness and boldly held the hands of the boys and walked into the quiet forest. The entire Pogley town was immersed in the joyous and festive atmosphere. No one expected that a huge crisis was quietly descending. Boom! An earth-shattering sound disturbed the people who were dancing. In an instant, all the music stopped. The people in the plaza also stopped dancing. They were at a loss. What happened? What was that sound just now? Who made such a loud noise? The townspeople of Pogley Town started discussing one after another. Who disturbed the harvest festival? Stand out. At this time, the old mayor of Pogley Town, an old man in his 60s with grizzled hair, stood up with a dark face and coldly berated. The Harvest Festival was the most important festival for the townspeople. Anyone who disturbed the Harvest Festival was unforgivable. Don't look at the old man's age and weak appearance. This old mayor, who used to be a mercenary, was the strongest person in Pogley Town. He had the strength of a senior great swordsman. He stood there and coldly glanced at the people in the plaza. His expression was not angry, but it was majestic. This old man had not been the mayor for many years. However, his prestige in the town was extremely high. The current mayor, who was his nephew, did not even dare to breathe loudly in front of him. No one will admit their mistake? The old mayor coldly snorted and said. Until now, he still thought it was a child's prank. He hoped that kid would bravely stand out and admit his mistake. As for the war, whether it was the old mayor or the townspeople, they would not think in that direction. The war was too far away from them. There were only so many townspeople. If they wanted to investigate, it would be easy to find out. Seeing that no one admitted their mistake, the old mayor's face had completely darkened. He secretly swore that if he found that kid, he would severely punish him. Boom, boom, boom. At this time, that sound rang out again. This time, the sound was louder and clearer than before. It sounded like an army of tens of thousands was marching. Even the earth shook slightly. What is that? At this time, a townspeople opened his eyes wide and pointed into the distance. His face revealed an extremely frightened expression. The old mayor raised his head and looked. He was stunned on the spot. He saw that in the sky above Pogley Town, dozens of flying monsters had appeared out of nowhere. They were like dark clouds, covering the entire sky. It was a type of monster that had never been seen before. The old mayor had been a mercenary for so many years, but he had never seen such a monster. They were not exotic beasts, but more like intelligent creatures. Their bodies were about the same size as humans. They had long horns on their heads and a pair of demonic wings on their back. They held all kinds of weapons in their hands. As they flew, they screamed and opened their mouths, revealing two sharp canine teeth. Their faces were ferocious, and their slender eyes revealed a murderous glint. Imps were one of the most powerful hell creatures. They looked similar to demons, but their size and strength were very different. Generally speaking, they had the strength of a master. Like all hell creatures, they were naturally bloodthirsty and ferocious. What is this? The old mayor's body trembled violently. He felt a powerful aura from those monsters that made his heart palpitate. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! It was unknown who shouted, but the whole town was in chaos. People screamed and ran in all directions. Women screamed and children cried incessantly. Don't panic! Don't panic! The old mayor anxiously shouted and tried to stop the people running in all directions. But in the face of extreme fear, it was futile. The townspeople only cared about running for their lives and didn't care about anything else. Gwa! The imps moved. They screamed and swooped down from the sky like birds. They grinned and raised their butchers' knives at the defenseless townspeople of Pogley Town. Kill! 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 Boom! 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 The imps were like tigers in a flock of sheep. They wantonly killed. The poor townspeople of Pogley Town didn't have many practitioners. Even their old mayor only had the strength of a master. He was simply powerless to resist. In front of the imps who had the strength of a master, it was a one-sided massacre. The harvest festival of Pogley Town had turned into a slaughterhouse in an instant. You, the old mayor's eyes were red. He saw his son, who was a senior warrior, his daughter-in-law who was still nursing her breast, and his 1-month-old grandson lying in a pool of blood. Their heads were separated from their bodies. I will fight you to the death. The old mayor was furious. He suddenly pulled out a long sword from his space bag and crazily rushed toward an imp. But before he could reach that imp, another imp quietly flew behind him. The long spear in his hand pierced the old mayor's body. The old mayor fell to the ground. His body was penetrated by the long spear. His face was distorted due to the pain. His festive attire was already dyed red with blood. Who are you? The old mayor stared at those imps and asked unwillingly. Another little demon looked at the old mayor on the ground with disdain. He lowered his head and picked up the long sword in the old mayor's hand. He turned the blade around and then fiercely stabbed the old mayor's chest. The old mayor's old and thin body struggled a few times before he stopped moving. Before dying, the old mayor's eyes stared at the corpses of his son and daughter-in-law. His eyes revealed endless resentment. Humph! You think you are qualified to ask? The imp who killed the old mayor sneered. His voice was as clear as a child's, but his actions were as cruel and ruthless as a demon. The screams gradually subsided. Under the siege of the flying imps, the tens of thousands of townspeople of Pogley Town died in the square celebrating the harvest festival. Chapter 686. Blood clouds filled the sky as the flames of war burned. The Burning Legion didn't stop and immediately launched a strategic attack. They destroyed everything like a wildfire. Whether it was cities or villages, whether it was civilians or nobles, everything was turned into ashes amidst wails. In just 2 short days, large swathes of land fell. The places that the Burning Legion reached all turned into hellish scenes. The blood clouds drifting in the sky became a nightmare that everyone in the Noah continent couldn't get rid of. The Burning Legion's arrival in the Noah continent and the arrival of so many devils from the divine realm caused a huge commotion in the Parliament. They held a top-secret closed-door meeting on the same day. However, in the meeting, apart from arguments, no one could come up with a suitable solution. The Burning Legion was too powerful. So powerful that no one dared to have the slightest intention of resisting. In the face of the Burning Legion's unstoppable attack, the resistance in the Noah continent was as laughable as a child resisting in front of an adult. Quiet, quiet, ladies and gentlemen. It's useless to argue like this. Facing the arguments in the Parliament Hall, Senator Undine finally couldn't hold it in anymore. She stood up and waved her hand to stop the arguing Parliament members and senators. The Parliament Hall paused for a moment before continuing to argue. At this juncture, Undine's words were of no use. Undine frowned. She glanced at Firth and sighed. Freya sighed as she looked at the chaotic scene in the Assembly Hall. It was as if a fight had broken out in the Assembly Hall. Facing the invasion of the Burning Legion, Frigga couldn't come up with a solution as a sense of helplessness welled up in her heart. Firth was also sullen. He didn't say a word as he couldn't come up with a better solution. Greetings, Madam Speaker, Vice Speaker, Senator. At this moment, a Parliament member stood up and walked to the front of the Senator's throne. He bowed and said, The burning legion from the main plane of hell has already descended upon our Noah continent. I wonder if my lords can come up with a practical and effective way to resist them? R.A. Firth frowned slightly. The counselor who spoke was from the Heavy Forest Monitor Lizard clan of the Kingdom of Magical Beasts. Although the Heavy Forest Monitor Lizards were distant relatives of the dragons, R.A. Firth never had a good impression of them. When the senator came to the door, in front of the senator's throne, everyone quietened down and looked at the senator quietly. Before Speaker Frigga could answer, Firth narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "What do you want to say?" That member of the Heavy Forest Monitor Lizard clan revealed a faint smile as he looked straight into the eyes of Firth. "I believe that Deputy Chairman is also a sensible person. The Burning Legion is too powerful for us to resist. Since that's the case, why can't we surrender?" Surrender? As soon as the word surrender was uttered, everyone was shocked. Everyone was astonished by the man's audacity. The hall was very quiet, terrifyingly quiet. "You're saying surrender?" R.A. Firth's face was terrifyingly dark. He slowly stood up and stared at the counselor with a cold aura emanating from his body. R.A. Firth was the patriarch of the dragons and was once the chairman of the parliament. He had great prestige among the members of the parliament and no one dared to speak up. Raphael was truly angry at this time. The appearance of these fence-sitters had deeply stimulated his self-esteem. He knew that it wasn't a coincidence that these people were willing to surrender. From the silence of the crowd, Raphael could also feel that many of them had the same idea. The Burning Legion was too powerful. They were so powerful that they couldn't resist. Under R.A. Firth's gaze, the Heavy Forest Monitor Lizard clan's counselor felt a little fearful. He gritted his teeth and mustered up his courage to speak. Lord R.A. Firth, actually, I'm thinking about everyone's lives. That's right, we're all powerhouses. We're not afraid of death, but what about our people?" After hearing the words of the Heavy Forest Monitor Lizard clan's counselor, many of them started thinking. Yes, since they couldn't resist, they might as well surrender. The Noah continent used to be the world of the dragons. Now it was the world of the Burning Legion. Wasn't it the same? Only a few of them tensed up, obviously disagreeing with the counselor's words. R.A. Firth nodded with a sullen expression. One couldn't tell if he was happy or angry. "Is this your thought? Or does it represent someone else's?" Seeing that R.A. Firth didn't flare up, the counselor's expression relaxed. He smiled and said, "Of course, this represents myself and the Heavy Forest Monitor Lizard clan. As the patriarch of the Heavy Forest Monitor Lizard clan, I have the right to decide the fate of the clan. After a discussion within the clan, the Heavy Forest Monitor Lizard clan has decided to leave the parliament and pledge allegiance to the Burning Legion. Please give us your permission, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and Mr. Senator." Everyone in the hall was stunned when they heard the declaration of surrender. They stared at R.A. Firth in unison to see how he would deal with it. R.A. Firth's expression remained calm. He nodded calmly and said, "Everyone has their own aspirations. Since you have such thoughts, there's no use keeping you around. All right then, I approve your application to leave the parliament." What? Lord Firth actually agreed? What was going on? Everyone's eyes widened, unable to believe what they were seeing. The Heavy Forest Monitor Lizard clan's counselor smiled. He knew that he had won. Not only did he give R.A. Firth a hard slap in the face in front of everyone, but he also left openly. If it was in the past, R.A. Firth would not have any pressure to execute him directly. However, he did not dare to do so now. After all, there were many eyes in the parliament watching him. The councilman smiled, turned around, and left. Just as he took 2 steps, it was too late to say anything, but it was too fast. Bang! A thick black arm pierced through his chest. That Heavy Forest Monitor Lizard clan's counselor's face was distorted. He widened his eyes in disbelief. He did not expect that R.A. Firth would dare to attack him at such a crucial moment. Was he not afraid that the others would rebel? R.A. Firth stood there with his hands behind his back. He did not attack. The one who attacked him was the powerhouse from the dragons beside him. However, R.A. Firth did not stop him. You, the powerhouse from the heavy forest monitor lizard clan, only managed to utter one word before he breathed his last with endless resentment. Even at the moment of his death, he did not understand why R.A. Firth dared to kill him. Deserting before the battle, death is not to be regretted. The powerhouse from the dragons who attacked him was Ranarier. With his strength and talent, killing a powerhouse from the sacred domain who was not a dragon was as easy as blowing off dust. Seeing Ranarier's performance, R.A. Firth nodded approvingly. He looked around and said, "Who else wants to surrender? Step forward." His iron-blooded methods intimidated everyone, and no one replied. The hall was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. Faced with Raphael's murderous gaze, all the powerhouses lowered their heads. R.A. Firth sneered and said, "Since there is no one else, let's continue the meeting." R.A. Firth turned around and met Frigga's gaze. Her eyes were filled with panic. R.A. Firth sighed inwardly. He was deeply disappointed in Frigga's performance. That's right, as a fairy dragon, Frigga had a noble status and powerful strength. In terms of strength, she was not inferior to him. However, what she lacked was not strength, but courage, tactics, and boldness. He had been thinking about whether his decision to step down from the chairman position and help the young Frigga up was wrong. No matter what, Frigga was a woman. The patriarch of the Beaumont clan, Hao Qin, was still fiddling with the teacup in his hand, as if he did not see anything. However, the other senators looked a little nervous. The others in the hall were not in the mood to argue and discuss. They could only wait quietly for the senator's decision. The high priestess of the Elven clan, Undine, sighed and said, "Deputy Chairman, we can't go on like this." R.A. Firth nodded lightly and said, "I know that, but with our strength, what can we do?" There were only 5 Godrealm experts in the entire Noah continent. Including Andrew, Ron, and Homelin, there were only 8 of them. Meanwhile, the Burning Legion had dozens of Godrealm experts. The difference was too great. Undine bit her lips and suddenly said, "Have you not looked for Lord Noah? Perhaps he has a better idea." Noah was Lord Noah's plane manager. This was a semi-public secret among the higher-ups of the Parliament. They all knew that Lord Noah was very powerful, terrifyingly powerful. However, they could not say how powerful he was. When the Noah continent was at its most dangerous, as a plane manager, it would be inexcusable if he did not come out to solve the problem. R.A. Firth smiled bitterly when he heard this. "Who said I didn't look for him? The moment the Burning Legion descended on the Noah continent, I immediately went to look for Lord Noah. I saw Mary at the planar crack, but she said, 'Lord Noah is currently not in the Noah continent.'" "What?" Undine was stunned. "She didn't say when she would be back?" "She didn't say." R.A. Firth rubbed his hands anxiously. "Moreover, she doesn't know where Lord Noah went. This is troublesome." Undine's hopeful eyes dimmed. Her green eyes looked at the empty seats of the 3 senators and revealed a thoughtful expression. R.A. Firth also looked at the empty seats and sighed. There was no need to talk about Andrew. Ron did not appear in this meeting that concerned the fate of the Noah continent. Naturally, Homelin would not appear either. In addition, the Calamity Church had been keeping a distance from the council for the past few years. They didn't attend any of the meetings. This made Raphael very angry, but he couldn't do anything about it. As the Scourge Church's influence grew, he could even feel that this organization called the Parliament of the Noah continent was slowly being marginalized. At this moment, an orc powerhouse barged into the meeting. He walked straight to the middle of the Parliament Hall. On the main seat, he whispered a few words to Li Jia. "What?" Chapter 687. The burning legion that descended on the Noah continent spread out in all directions. The flames of war burned the entire continent. Be it the human world, the Orc Empire, the Elven Forest, or even the magical Beast Empire, the burning legion could be seen everywhere. Starting from Pogli Town, the burning legion took only a few hours to invade the Roland Empire. The burning legion's advance was extremely fast. By the time the Emperor of the Roland Empire, Nicholas XXXII, learned of this news, the burning legion had already invaded the hinterland and wreaked havoc in the major cities of the Roland Empire. Everywhere they went, regardless of whether they were nobles or commoners, they met the fate of being massacred. One city after another was turned into ruins in the raging fire. The panic-stricken Roland Empire's emperor, Nikolai, immediately organized the empire's army to resist and launched a battle at a place called Waterloo. Unfortunately, the Roland Empire's resistance was futile. The strength of the main battle legion was not something a small country's army could resist. In front of the burning legion, the Roland Empire's army quickly melted like snow in spring meeting the sun. In just a short while, the army of hundreds of thousands suffered an unprecedented defeat. The Battle of Waterloo was definitely the ugliest, most humiliating, and most shameful battle in the history of the Roland Empire. In front of the burning legion, they could not even last for 5 minutes. That was such a powerful team. The so-called master-level and master-level powerhouses in the mouths of humans were just ordinary goods in the burning legion. Even if they reached the sanctuary realm, they would only be insignificant leaders. Only by reaching the strength of the divine domain could one truly occupy a place in the burning legion. This was a powerful army that had never been seen in the history of the Noah continent. Its appearance was the nightmare of all the creatures in the Noah continent. In that battle, hundreds of thousands of human soldiers fell like wheat being cut down. The mutilated corpses piled up into hills, and the blood that flowed out formed lake. In the decades that followed, this place called Waterloo became a fertile land nourished by the blood of the brave human soldiers. In front of such a powerful force, the fighting spirit of the Roland Empire's soldiers collapsed in an instant. Even the surviving soldiers became idiots and were slaughtered like pigs and sheep. The commander of that battle did not return after setting out. On the battlefield, he committed suicide with endless humiliation and fear. There were no words that could describe the misery of this battle. Even the history books of later generations rarely mention this because this battle was truly too tragic. In that battle, the Roland Empire lost hundreds of thousands of its most elite human soldiers, including countless respected mages, and even the sacred domain powerhouse, Water Mage Saint Mise, died on the spot under the siege of dozens of sacred domain-level hell creatures of the Burning Legion. The Burning Legion advanced like wildfire. After defeating the resistance of the Roland Empire, they quickly reached the capital of the Roland Empire, Milan City. Milan City was no exception. Under the powerful combat power of the Burning Legion, it fell in just an hour. Whether it was the royal family, nobles, or soldiers of the Roland Empire, they had all lost the confidence to resist the Burning Legion. The Burning Legion wantonly massacred the streets of Milan City. The Emperor of the Roland Empire, Nikolai XXXII, took his family disguised as civilians and escaped from the palace through a secret passage. They went all the way west and fled to Balavac City. The humans at the front fled as fast as they could, while the Burning Legion chased after them like duck. Sometimes, a few hell creatures could chase thousands of humans into chaos. When Emperor Nikolai of the Roland Empire brought his family and ministers to Balavac City, Balavac's Academy, Soaring Dragon Academy, and Hans Academy had already received the news and were evacuating their students. The deans of the 3 academies in Balavac City knew that they were unable to resist the Burning Legion's attack with their own strength. In just a few hours, the Burning Legion arrived and easily took over Balavac City. Platz, Montego, and Hill escorted Emperor Nikolai and his family to the south. Without an army that could resist, the Roland Empire, which had been established for thousands of years, only existed in name. It had only been a few hours since the Burning Legion arrived. The survivors escaped from the big cities and hid in the remote countryside. Fortunately, the Burning Legion did not actively send troops to pursue them. They went all the way west and then split into two groups. One group went south, while the other continued west. And on the other side of the Noah continent, the Burning Legion quickly headed east. The Cthulhu King Ravens was extremely confident in the strength of the army under his command. They spread out in all directions and swept across the world in the shortest time possible. The Orc Empire dominated the northwest of the Noah continent. It had always been a land of bitter cold, but because of its vast territory, rich resources, and the fact that the orcs had a much smaller population than humans, they had always had a good life. The Orc Empire, the border city of Zangara. As an important town on the southwest border of the Orc Empire, Zangara's defensive power was very majestic. Unlike the exquisitely carved defensive structures of the humans, the orc defensive structures were very crude. Huge wooden pillars stood tall, their sharpened tips glowing with a cold light. Of course, this was nothing. Compared to the sturdy city walls, the orc warriors in Zangara City were the most powerful defensive force. They did not have the fancy fighting aura of human swordsmen, only the most ordinary brute force. It was this brute force, combined with the orc martial arts, that had never been at a disadvantage in their thousands of years of conflict with the humans. Other than the magical beasts, the Orc Empire was the second most powerful force on the Noah continent. Zangara had always been peaceful, because in the entire Noah continent, other than the Orc Empire, no one dared to challenge the authority of the orcs. But today, the sky above Zangara City was filled with battle clouds, and the atmosphere was unusually tense. It looked like a war could break out at any moment. A branch of the Burning Legion had already crossed the Roland Empire. They did not stop within the Roland Empire, but after a round of destruction, they came to the border of the Orc Empire. At this moment, the orc warriors rushed to the top of the city wall with weapons in hand. They were fully armed, and their expressions were serious. Pairs of ferocious eyes stared unwaveringly into the distance. Countless blood clouds whizzed over, bringing with them the aura of death. Below Zangara City, countless hell creatures gathered. They roared and howled, looking at the top of the city wall with bloodthirsty gazes. The flames of destruction burned fiercely on their bodies. The black demon flag fluttered in the wind, symbolizing the arrival of the Burning Legion. Cerberus the size of a calf, Hellfire the size of a small mountain, burning with flames all over its body, Mago holding a small fireball in his hand, ironstone demons with extremely sturdy bodies and strong defenses. Of course, there was also the strongest, fiercest, and cruelest hell creature, the Great Demon, who had arrived outside Zangara City. The gates of Zangara City were open, and countless orc warriors poured out. The heavily armored orc soldiers stood below the city wall, coldly confronting the Burning Legion in the distance. They formed an unusually strong human wall, protecting Zangara City behind them. Compared to the humans, the defense of the orc city was not strong, but the orcs had always believed that the strongest defense was not to be passive, but to attack and attack again. As if sensing the strength of the orcs, the hell creatures of the Burning Legion did not brazenly attack. They kept growling, as if waiting for orders. Roar! At this time, the hell creatures of the Burning Legion roared in unison, the sound shaking the roof tiles. The orc army also responded with a high-pitched roar. They kept beating their chests and howling like wild beasts, their ferocious faces showing extreme madness. Kill! 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 Chapter 688. Kill! 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 Boom! 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 Countless pillars of fire shot into the sky and fell towards Zankara, creating earth-shattering explosions. The sturdy city walls were damaged, and parts of them began to collapse. Countless pieces of rubble fell down and ignited a huge fire. At the same time, the orcs also launched a counterattack. Countless spears were madly thrown at the burning legion. This was an attack launched by the orc trolls. After only 3 rounds of rain of fire, Zankara's city walls were reduced to ruins. At this time, the terrifying burning legion was like a demon opening its eyes. It finally launched an attack. Huge sharp claws trampled on the ground. Every step the burning legion took left behind a flaming footprint. The blood clouds in the sky seemed to have thickened, and it was as if a hidden demon was laughing sinisterly. Countless small demons rushed towards the city walls like a bloody gust of wind. The burning legion's ground forces rushed towards Zankara city like a tidal wave. Roar! Seeing the enemies approaching, the orcs' eyes were filled with burning fighting spirit. They roared, waved their heavy weapons, and fiercely launched a counterattack against the burning legion. They actually launched a counterattack against the burning legion. Woo! 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 The low sound of a horn resounded through the world. It was a tragic battle song. Countless orc warriors rushed forward dauntlessly towards the enemies who were much stronger than them. Dong! 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 The huge Kodo beasts shook their heavy heads. On their backs, the heroic orc knights rotated their arms, and the hammers in their hands continuously struck the huge war drums, making dull sounds. The sound of the war drums pounded on the hearts of the orcs, bringing with it the power to motivate them to work harder. Kill them! Kill these bastards! The orcs howled and raised their axes high as they charged forward. They fiercely collided with the burning legion, and an earth-shattering sound erupted. The 4-meter-tall hellfire actually had the power of the sacred domain. The blazing flames on their bodies made it impossible for people to approach them. Their fists, which were as hard as stone, had already become the orcs' nightmare. Zankara's unstable city walls had already fallen, but the orcs didn't care. To them, the city walls were just decorations and had no meaning at all. I don't know which orc general once said, "There is no city wall in the world that can absolutely defend against the enemy's attack. The only thing that can truly defend against the enemy is the courage, sacrifice, and strength of the orcs." The Beastman's beast god Li Jia also said, "Beastman cities don't have solid walls. Behind them is the entire Beastman empire." In the Beastman's dictionary, there is no word for defense. There is only one word, and that is to attack. Attack again and again. Noble beastmen, even if they die, they will die in the charge. The orc race had this fierce and aggressive war culture, which had always been a headache for the powerhouses of the Noah continent. During the most powerful period of the orc race, they often attacked the weak humans. It wasn't until they discovered the rich resources in the northern part of the empire that they stopped. Facing the powerful burning legion, the orcs didn't shrink back. In the face of such a great disparity in strength, the orcs chose to fight to the death. Mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The heroic orc warriors swung their huge axes and cut the burning creatures in half one after another. They fell into pools of blood one after another. Their corpses piled up into hills, and their blood paved the way in such a great disparity in strength. The courage and strength of the orcs played a huge role. The situation was deadlocked, and countless orc warriors sacrificed themselves to stop the advance of the burning legion. On the other side of the city of Zankara, a tall, majestic building lay quietly. It was a huge demonic war chariot. The huge demonic head was raised high in the sky, and its burning eyes stared ahead, making people shudder. A huge figure was sitting on the demonic war chariot. It was a greater demon with the strength of a god's realm. He was lazily lying on the demonic war chariot, looking at everything in front of him with great interest. His sinister and terrifying face was filled with a cruel smile. That greater demon didn't appear. If he did, he could easily capture Zankara. However, it had to be known that God's realm powerhouses also had dignity. If a God's realm powerhouse did everything by himself, then there would be no need for the people below him to exist. The orcs are really a fighting race, not bad. Ha ha ha. The greater demon on the demonic war chariot clapped his hands and laughed. Sir. The demon servant next to him came over with a smile. Unfortunately, their efforts are in vain. The Noah continent. We have already investigated it, and there is no power that can stop the Burning Legion. What a pity. The greater demon shook his head and clicked his tongue. The strength of the orcs is too far from ours. It's useless to rely on hot-bloodedness and courage. If it were the behemoth army from the power plane, it would be more likely. The behemoth army from the power plane was also one of the main armies. They were powerful, and even the insufferably arrogant Burning Legion feared them. These aboriginals are just looking for death. The demon servant smiled contemptuously. Let's show them the true strength of the main army. Boom, boom, boom. Under the bombardment of countless flames, the gates of Zankara finally fell. The huge gates crashed to the ground with a loud noise, and smoke rose into the air like a floating cloud. Roar! The Burning Legion roared, and their fighting spirit soared to the highest point. The fall of the gates meant that this battle was about to end. The scales of the war began to tilt towards the Burning Legion. Just as the greater demon had said, in the face of absolute strength, no matter how much they struggled, it was futile. The orc warriors wielding huge axes and wearing heavy armor, the troll headhunters wielding spears, the orc witch doctors in charge of healing, they all fell into pools of blood. The gates of Zankara were wide open, but unfortunately, not a single orc turned around to look. They were desperately resisting the attacks of the Burning Legion with their flesh and blood. Charge! At this time, someone shouted. Suddenly, countless orcs rushed out of the city. Among them were sturdy orc aunties in their 70s, as well as orc youths who were less than 15 years old. Without exception, they all held simple weapons and rushed out with roars. The orcs' fighting spirit was already ingrained in their bones. Regardless of whether they were old, weak, women, or children, they all had decent fighting power. At the moment of Zankara's life and death, they did not hesitate to pick up their weapons and join the battle. The unstoppable Burning Legion was like a demon opening its terrifying eyes, swallowing everything in front of them. The sun hanging high in the sky seemed to not dare to see this scene and quietly hid in the clouds. Between heaven and earth, only the existence of blood was left. The battle in Zankara lasted for just over 2 hours. With the fall of the last orc warrior, it finally came to an end. The once bustling Zankara city was set ablaze, and the thick smoke produced by the flames rose dozens of meters into the air. It looked particularly tragic. At this moment, the battlefield of Zankara city was littered with corpses. Apart from a few hell creatures, most of them were orcs. They were worthy of the title of heroes. They fought to the last moment, and many orcs died while holding on to their enemies. An orc warrior was still firmly holding onto an imp's neck even after his death. A faint mournful aura spread out and filled the entire battlefield. Everyone was singing for the fallen soldiers. The 100,000 orc soldiers of Zankara city, as well as the hundreds of thousands of orc women and children, had all died in battle. They used the pride, courage, and fighting spirit unique to the orcs to compose a song of loyalty. Boom, boom, boom. The vengeful souls of the hundreds of thousands of orcs in Zankara city were unable to stop the Burning Legion. In the glorious history of the Burning Legion, this was only a small interlude. After destroying Zankara city, they quickly headed south, and their next target was the orcs. Chapter 689. What? You're saying that the Burning Legion has already started attacking the Orc Empire? In the meeting hall of the council, Ligia's eyes were wide open, and his skinny hands were tightly gripping the orc's arm, trembling slightly. There had never been any news that could make Li Jiao lose his composure like this. The thing he was most worried about had finally happened. With the arrival of the Burning Legion, no force could escape, but Li Jia did not know that they would arrive so quickly. What? They're so fast that they've already attacked the Orc Empire in just a few days? Hearing this news, R.A. Firth was equally shocked. After all, the Kingdom of Warcraft was to the west of the Orc continent. It's faster than you think. Now, the Burning Legion has already broken through the strategic town of Zankala on the eastern border of the Orc Empire, and is now advancing towards Zumur City. Liga was indeed the leader of the Beastmen. After a brief moment of shock, he quickly calmed down. He looked at everyone around him and gritted his teeth. Although I don't want to admit it, I believe that soon, the Beastmen Empire will fall. R.A. Firth had a complicated expression when he heard this. After the Orc Empire fell completely, the Kingdom of Warcraft would not be spared either. His dragon's headquarters, Dragon Island, which was like a small continent, would also be exposed to the Burning Legion's attack. All the powerhouses of the council looked at each other, their faces full of shock. They did not expect the Burning Legion to be so powerful that destroying a country would be child's play for them. This was the difference in absolute power, a council member said in a trembling voice. The Burning Legion is so powerful? No one responded. The meeting hall was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Everyone's hearts felt heavy, as if a large stone was pressing down on them. Li Jia looked at the silent council members, then at the panicked council member Frigga, and could not help but feel annoyed. Back then, the magical beasts led by the dragons had set up the council, and he and the orcs could not wait to join this organization. But now, looking back, he found that this organization called the council could only deal with some insignificant matters. When it came to truly important matters, it could not do anything. Thinking of this, Li Jia was filled with deep disappointment towards the council. Li Jia slowly raised his head, his eagle-like gaze sweeping across the entire venue as he spoke indifferently. Our Beastmen race is suffering a calamity. If there is nothing else, I want to go back first. Li Jia's eyes finally fixed on R.A. Firth, quietly waiting for his response. R.A. Firth was silent, Frigga was silent, and all the other senators were silent. Facing the Burning Legion that was unstoppable, everyone's choice was to retreat. Seeing that Firth didn't say anything, Li Jia's eyes narrowed slightly, revealing a trace of cold light. He snorted coldly, "Let's go." Li Jia fiercely waved his sleeves and angrily left the venue, Zumur City, the imperial capital of the Orc Empire. Zumur City was the main city of the Orcs, and its tall and sturdy city walls showed an extraordinary temperament. However, there was a different atmosphere in Zumur City at the moment. On the high city walls, countless Orc soldiers were holding giant axes and constantly patrolling, looking as if they were facing a great enemy. An Orc witch doctor in a white witch doctor robe was curled up in a corner of the city wall, looking ahead vigilantly through the shooting holes in the wall. Under the city wall, countless wolf riders were gathering. The ugly orc wolf riders were riding on the backs of giant wolves, constantly shouting some language that only giant wolves could understand as they ran back and forth. The huge Kodo beast was lying under the barracks, level with the houses. Its sturdy and huge body was like a moving city wall. In the sky, a few wyverns roared past from time to time, adding a bit of tension to the atmosphere in Zumur City. Salamon, the beast emperor of the orcs, stood on the city wall, looking into the distance with a worried expression. There was a thoughtful look in his eyes. Next to him was the beautiful orc girl, Holy Wizard Morin. "Reporting to your majesty, the Burning Legion is here, less than 15 kilometers away from Zumur City." At this time, a wyvern knight descended from the sky, landed on the ground, and reported to Salamon, the beast emperor, while kneeling on one knee. "What? They came so quickly?" Although he was mentally prepared, Salamon still turned pale with fright. The Burning Legion was like a wildfire invading the earth, and their speed of advancement was unexpected by many people. Yes, the Burning Legion has been unstoppable, and no force can stop their advance. Even Lima City, what? Lima City has also fallen? When the Beast Emperor Salaman heard this, his face turned pale and his body went limp, almost falling down. One had to know that Lima City was his hometown. Morin immediately went up to support him. The battle was too tragic. The Burning Legion was very powerful, and we orcs were no match for them even if we fought to the death. Even our 19th Wyvern Legion. That Wyvern Knight sighed, and a trace of sadness appeared on his sinister face. If I hadn't rushed back to report, I'm afraid I would have. Salaman took a closer look and saw that the Wyvern Knight had many injuries on his body, and was stained with blood. Generally speaking, the Wyvern Legion, as an air force, would rarely be hit hard. If even the air force was wiped out, it meant that the battle was far more tragic than imagined. All right, you can go now. After hearing what he wanted to hear, Salaman sighed and waved his hand weakly. The Wyvern Knight bowed and silently retreated. Salaman took a deep breath and broke free from Moran's support. He walked forward silently, and the cold wind blew up his clothes, making them flutter in the wind. The Beast Emperor, Salaman, was quietly looking at the bottom of the city wall with a grave expression. Countless orcs were pouring in from the city gate. Their clothes were ragged, and they had panicked expressions. They were refugees from all over the world. Has Master Li Da not returned yet? After a long while, the Beast Emperor, Salaman, finally spoke. He was asking Morin. Morin bit her lips. I've already sent someone to inform Grandfather. I believe that he will quickly rush back after receiving the news. The Beast Emperor, Salaman, nodded. Although he was clear that even if Master Li Da rushed back, he wouldn't be of much use. He had already received news that in the Burning Legion, there were dozens of God Realm experts like Master Li Da thinking of having to face dozens of God Realm experts like Master Li Da. Salaman felt a chill run down his spine. The difference in strength between the two sides was too great. The Noah continent has suffered such a calamity, and Lord Noah isn't here. Could it be that the orcs are going to be exterminated by my hands? Heavens! How did the Noah continent provoke such a powerful enemy? The Beast Emperor, Salaman, couldn't help but let out a long howl, his expression sorrowful. As if she felt a chill, Morin tightened her white robe. She bit her lips, and her face seemed to be in a difficult position. How about, we surrender? The orcs never had the word surrender in their dictionary. Morin's suggestion bore a lot of pressure, and saying it at this time was a serious crime. Surrender? After hearing Morin's words, Salaman unexpectedly didn't get angry. He turned around and the muscles on his face twitched a few times. He glanced at Morin and sighed slightly. Do you really think that surrendering can solve the problem? Morin raised her head and looked at the Beast Emperor in confusion. If I were the commander of the Burning Legion, Salaman pointed to himself, I wouldn't need to accept the surrender of the orcs because the difference in strength between the two sides is too great. You mean, they don't care about us at all? Morin looked shocked. Salaman nodded slowly. Although I don't want to admit it, this is indeed the truth. As he spoke, the wind and clouds suddenly changed. In the sky above Zumur City, a blood cloud floated over, bringing with it a bloody and murderous aura. For a moment, everyone in Zumur City had a change of expression. The Burning Legion was finally here. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.